Joe Rogan Podcast. Check it out.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan Podcast by night, all day.
So what did you think about the whole UFO thing before you got in office?
So I actually had, when I was stationed at Portland Air National Guard, my job there was an airfield manager. So I would interface and work a lot with the F-15 pilots at the unit. And so there had been an airspace incursion that had taken place when I was still at the time at the Guard. And I remember kind of talking to some of the pilots about it. And I was like, what was that? And they're like, we can't really talk about it. No one really wanted to address it. And so from what I had gathered, that had been likely a UAP. And so that kind of was my perspective. Granted, I also grew up in the generation of the X-Files and, I don't know if you remember 94 Independence Day. So like for me specifically, I didn't look at it with like a crazy lens and perspective. I'm like, you never know if, we're the only ones out there essentially.
But why did you assume that if it's a top secret incursion that he couldn't talk about, that it wasn't just a military craft from another country?
Because of the way that he was discussing it.
What did he say?
So he had been, he didn't want to, from what I gather, get taken off flight status. And he's like, I really can't discuss it. We couldn't really identify it essentially, and it had outperformed them. And so that was my first, from a military perspective, kind of experience with someone who basically, there's a stigma within the flight community. Do you want to lose your security clearance? Is there this level of crazy that people kind of brand that will stick with you and kind of ruin your career?
But doesn't he have instrumentation on his jet?
Well, at the time, right? So it's an older platform, but he really didn't want to even talk about it. And I bring that up because now with our investigation and the task force that I run, actually the reason why the task force was formed was because of an event that happened at Eglin Air Force Base where both myself, Representative Matt Gaetz, and Representative Tim Burchett actually had responded and gone to investigate multiple Air Force pilots that had come forward in regards to UAP incidences that had occurred. And they were alleging that the Air Force was covering it up.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that was that. And I'm happy to go into detail on that one. But what I will tell you is the stuff that I saw at Eglin, how the military responded, me being, a former service member, and then ultimately what I saw with the pushback of the military not even wanting to share with Congress information, which is a big problem because when you have Congress that's supposed to be the advocate and voice for the American people, the oversight body, and you're being denied access, not just from a base commander, but high level up at the Pentagon, even Secretary of Defense, it's a problem.
Do you think that it's possible that these are U.S. vehicles that are top secret?
I definitely think that there's a level of advanced technology that the U.S. government has. And I think that tech can be housed within the defense contractor realm. And of course, some information is going to be classified. But I can also tell you, and this might sound crazy, but based on our investigations and stuff that we've seen, there is definitely something that I think would rival what we know currently with physics, and a tech that potentially is out there that we don't have the ability to reproduce, because it would basically be like dropping a cell phone right off back during the time of maybe caveman. So we just don't have the tech to develop it yet. What I can also tell you is based on our interviews, and this has been something that you can go back and watch with the congressional hearings, but I was actually able to ask some of the witnesses, what are these things? And they keep saying interdimensional. And then when you talk about the interdimensional aspect of, are these things pre-existing, maybe outside of what we currently know as our own dimension? That stuff can kind of all sound crazy, but at the end of the day, my job as an investigator is to receive all the information, decipher it, and then ultimately from a congressional aspect, if you do have contractors that are withholding information or operating outside of the purview of the federal government, there's budgetary issues, but there's definitely something that I can tell you with confidence that exists that we don't know how to explain currently.
So when you say that it operates outside our understanding of physics, what specifically are you saying? What happened?
To I guess break it down in simple terms is that I think that some of the tech that exists, that whatever these things have, these energy things have.
Energy things? What do you mean?
Well, they call them interdimensional beings. I think that they can actually operate through the time spaces that we currently have. And that's not something that I came up with on my own. That's based on stuff that we've seen. That's based on information that we've been told. And then also, too, I think that there's this historical aspect of, this gets into the deeper theories and concepts of religion and I think the history that we currently know. And that kind of spins off into another topic of, you have the modern day Bible, you have this aspect of Bibles or books of the Bible that have been removed that explain and kind of touch on these topics. And I think that we're in a time and age where you have such a vast amount of information that we have access to via social media, via your cell phone, via the internet. And so it's really changing the way that we understand, the origins of life and the spiritual reality that we know.
When you
currently.
say interdimensional beings, that they know that these are interdimensional beings, how do they know that?
Based on testimony would be based on witnesses that have come forward. But what I can tell you
So the
is
witnesses just were told that they were
No,
interdimensional?
that they've seen things. And what I can tell you without getting into classified conversations is that there have been incidences that I believe where very credible people have reported that there have been movement outside of time and space.
That's very vague.
Yeah. So, look.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Look. Have I seen a portal open? No. Have I seen a spaceship? Personally, no. Have I seen evidence of this? Yes. Have I seen photo documentation of aircraft that I believe were not made by mankind? Yes. Is there historical significance to this? Yes. Is there multiple events that go back to, I would argue, maybe even before the time of Christ that have documented this in text? Yes. So do I believe that the government has access to certain technology? Yes, to an extent. And I believe that certain contractors potentially have back engineered this tech. I think that that's what can explain the advancements that we're seeing. But I also believe that this is a dangerous level of hidden information from the American people, because if you have an aspect of the federal government, which I can tell you, I, with two other members of Congress, were denied access to information at Eglin Air Force Base pertaining to whistleblowers because of the fact, and we can get into that story and what happened at Eglin in a second, but we were denied access and told that we don't have security clearance or the read-in authority on a special access program. That's a problem, because I'm supposed to represent and be an investigative body, and you have then people who are unelected that are operating basically in secrecy, and that's a problem. That's a big problem.
And so how do these people have the authority to do that?
I think it's been decades of classified secret information, then also this aspect of the intelligence community that's been empowered. And it's kind of serendipitous with timing, because when you talk about the intelligence communities and what they've done essentially to the trust in this country with the American people, I think this goes all the way back even into JFK, with how they basically have operated outside of the purview of Congress and basically, to an extent, have gone rogue up until recently. You're seeing a big push and pull to try to rein in these intelligence agencies currently.
Yeah. So what I want to bring it back to evidence. You said that you've seen evidence. Like, what kind of evidence have you seen?
I have seen photos. I have seen...
what have you seen photos of?
So I was in a skiff, and I can't discuss all that was in a skiff, but what I can tell you is based on the photos that I've seen, I'm very confident that there's things out there that have not been created by mankind.
It seems crazy that people have access to information that shows that there's something outside of us that is more intelligent, at least more capable than we are, and they hide it from everybody else.
What I can tell you is that when you have thousands upon thousands of people around the planet throughout time that have reported something.
Right.
To say that those people are crazy, to say that, the whole concept of even just asking the question that you might not necessarily be psychologically sound, that in itself, that's a disinformation campaign to get people to shut up about it. And that's a problem. We know that the U.S. government has not exactly been clean, and a lot of what they've done with the American people, specifically to the topic of UFOs.
Which makes you think that it's probably because there's something there. If you think about the motivation they had with Project Blue Book, when J. Allen Hynek was running Project Blue Book, this specific intention was to discredit all stories.
And he ended up ultimately, though, after all of his investigations, becoming someone that was like, I think there's something here. But that's true. By the way, a lot of people might not necessarily go onto Google and look up that information, but you can actually look up the declassified reports from Project Blue Book. What's also interesting, though, is when we're talking about tech, right? The ability for this tech, being that it exists, to change dependence for entire governments on things like fossil fuel, et cetera. It's look, I think everyone has a moral obligation to do what they think is right. Okay. And so if you're in a position of power and you see something wrong and you're not addressing it, I think, this in itself, getting the truth out there for people to decide for themselves. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm just telling you in our investigations and what we are pushing for in regards to transparency. I would like to see the federal government roll out some of the stuff that we've been given access to, because I think that information belongs in the hands of the American people. And it's not even just the U.S. government. I mean, there's other countries around the world that have done certain things like this. Now, look, I've had a lot of crazy people show up at my office and say, I've heard it all. Yeah, I've been to Mars. I have a chip in my brain, all this stuff.
They all have chips.
We had this one guy that showed up that was like trying to give us a USB. He's like, put this in your computer. They're going to kill me for this. And like runs away. And I'm like, I'm not putting that in my computer. But based on our investigations, what I will tell you is, there's been 2 members of Congress that are actually helping to lead out these investigations with me. And the reason I say that is because up until last Congress, if you even said the word UAP or UFO, people actually told us that if we went forward with these investigations that we were going to ruin our political careers. And so, we're in the mindset of, well, like, why wouldn't we ask these questions? And also, too, if no one wants to touch it, like, there has to be something here, right?
Right.
And so in these investigations, I mean, the amount of people that will come up to us, very successful people, to multiple members of Congress that believe the same thing, it's definitely changed in regards to the stigma that used to exist about disclosure and all this. And so what we're trying to do currently there's a big documentary that was filmed about 1.5 years ago, and we're trying to get a screening up on Capitol Hill. But look, I think a lot of people say, well, this is a distraction from everything else happening in the country right now. And all I'm simply trying to say is it's not a distraction. The people that are kind of helping to divulge all this information. You have an intelligence community, Tulsi Gabbard, Radcliffe, Kash Patel. They have been truly, in regards to our other investigations, extremely transparent and wanting to get this information out. But it doesn't mean that within these intelligence communities there isn't pushback. And so part of the reason why the task force was formed pertaining to things like UAP, pertaining to things like the Jeffrey Epstein stuff, pertaining to things like the JFK, MLK, and RFK investigations is because even though we don't hold declassification authority, what we're trying to do is push these agencies and be, if you will, the pit bull and the attack dog on trying to get this information released. And to a lot of these agencies' credits, they've been extremely transparent, and we have gotten wins specifically on the JFK stuff, and we're still looking to declassify and ask specifically on the UAP topic.
What would be the rationale for keeping a photograph of a known absolute not of this world craft from the American people or from the world? Why would anybody think that would be the smart thing to do, is to limit the access of that information to a very small amount of people?
I think that part of the fear is that you have advisors that think that, the American people or humanity might not be able to handle it. There's this protective complex, but then also too, I think when you are talking about these things, for a lot of people, I think that it kind of can rock your world a little bit in regards to where you stand in a faith perspective. And then also, too, an aspect of, well, how do you even begin to explain it? And all I'm going to say is, look, and we can go into some of the books that were removed from what we know as the modern day Bible, but I read through the Book of Enoch multiple times. And I'm not saying that these things are angels. Okay, that's not at all what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that depending on where you are in regards to your whole perspective on whether or not God exists, like I believe in God, I'm a Christian. There has to have been, and there's admissions that there was other creations that God made, but that we were the most prized creation. And so I think that this can open up a bigger topic of discussion. What I will say is that what's been interesting is, and I've had a mass array of people that have come in, right? Like we have people that come in that claim that you can use this ability to basically dog whistle these things in from a psychic ability.
Yeah, I've heard people say that.
And I think that there's something there. Otherwise, they wouldn't necessarily be able to provide some of the video evidence that they have. But then that also brings up the question of if these things are interdimensional, which we've had witnesses testify to members of Congress, and that was all publicly out there, that would then bring up the whole, well, if this is really transcending dimension, the power of what you say, thought, all of that. And then, you can look into our own government's declassified documents that the CIA had on different experiments. I mean, you can literally, last week I was going through, actually on a Friday night, I just put my son down, and I was going through some of the declassified, you go to cia.gov/reading room and you can see all the declassified documents. And so I believe it was called Stargate, and it was talking about, the basically psychological experiments where they were trying to basically remote view and all that. Why would our own government be looking into that if there wasn't something there? And so I'm appreciative to all that information being publicly out there, but I think this whole idea and stigma of trying to make it sound crazy when people actually have these questions, that needs to stop, which is why the task force is in existence. And then also, too, they need to release information.
If I was going to play devil's advocate, I would say that the government would look into that to find out if there's anything there. And that would probably take a long time if they're really being careful. So if I was going to fund a program, if someone told me that there's some people in Russia that can remote view military sites in America, I'd be like, are you sure? And like, yeah, there's a technique involved and we know the technique and we want to fund some sort of a study to see if we can do it. I'm like, let's go. What do you need? Because if maybe it's real. So I don't buy that they wouldn't spend money on it unless it's real. I say they would spend money on it to find out if you're really looking out for national security, right? You've got 300 and plus million people that you're responsible for. You got to dot your I's and cross your T's. And like, if I'm, if I'm good at my job and I'm not an egomaniac, I'm going to go, maybe there's some shit I don't know.
Well, there's looking into it and then there's expanding, right? And so if you look at all those declassified files, you can pull up, and this is just wild, but there's one where I was looking through and they had basically, the Coast Guard had called in, there was a ship that they had been given information on that was running drugs. And so they called in one of their remote viewers and they're trying to give coordinates of the ship and actually basically locate these things. And I actually was laughing because I was reading this off the website and I'm telling my husband, I'm like, imagine, you're trying to run drugs and then all of a sudden you have some weirdo at Langley or in a basement. They're like, nope, just here's the coordinates, beam me up, Scotty. But
yeah, I don't know if they write things down or type them out or what, but I talked to Hal Putoff about it and he said they used it to very specifically find the location of a downed Russian craft within a couple kilometers, which is nuts. If you think about the area where this thing crashed, it's remote wilderness, the middle of nowhere. Russia hadn't found it yet. And apparently we found it first, according to Hal Putoff. It's just because I haven't done it and because I don't know that it's real doesn't mean it's not real. And this is a problem with people. They don't want to get duped and they don't want to look stupid. They don't want to look naive. And so they dismiss things. They dismiss that there might be frequencies that you don't tune into all the time, and someone might get really good at that, and they might be able to see things remotely. This episode is brought to you by the Farmer's Dog. I think we can all agree that eating highly processed food for every meal isn't optimal. So why is processed food the status quo for dog food? Because that's what kibble is, an ultra-processed food. But a healthy alternative exists. The Farmer's Dog. They make fresh food for dogs. And what does it look like? Real meat and vegetables that are gently cooked to retain vital nutrients and help avoid any of the bad stuff that comes with ultra processing. And it's not just random ingredients thrown together. Their food is formulated by on-staff board certified vet nutritionists. These people are experts on dog nutrition, and they're all in on fresh food. The Farmer's Dog also does something unique. They portion out the food to your dog's nutritional needs. This ensures that you don't overfeed them, making weight management easy. Research shows that dogs kept at a healthy weight can live up to 2.5 years longer. Head to thefarmersdog.com/Rogan to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. This offer is for new customers only.
Well, I think that this gets into the bigger discussion of what do we know, right? Going back to some of these books that were removed. There's a good podcast right now called The Autistic Tapes, and it talks about how some non-speaking or non-verbal autistic kids actually are exhibiting telepathy.
You mean the telepathy tapes?
Yeah, the telepathy tapes. Non-verbal autistic kids are exhibiting telepathy. This concept, again, if you were to talk about it 20 years ago, people will call you crazy, but, I think based on what we're seeing now, based on the fact that our own government's looked into it, based on the stuff that you were saying, I mean, you can find all this information publicly available and it's out there. And I think that there's something to it. And so, we're seeing, and we've heard, this is in non-classified settings, we've heard from people that have come forward that are saying, we're being able to, via meditation, we're essentially like downloading information and we can communicate with these things. Granted, when I'm sitting in my congressional office and I'm hearing this, I take it with a grain of salt because we do get a lot of crazy people. But when you have people that are high-level executives, very successful, clean-cut, not on drugs, they're coming in and they're telling you this stuff, and then, you're kind of cross-referencing it with various people in intelligence agencies. I think that there's something there and we need to be at least open to hearing the discussion and the argument for these things.
Oh, for sure. I mean, like I said, if there's a photo out there, I think you owe humanity a service. You're supposed to release that photograph. There's no reason why a small group of people in the government should have photo-conclusive evidence that aliens are real.
And that's
crazy.
And there's an overclassification aspect of this too, right? Like if you're serving in the military and you're taking a photo on your personal device or a video on your personal device, that shouldn't be the purview of the federal government. And either which way, I mean, there's been now so much stuff. There's been a lot of fake stuff put out there. But the stuff that is legitimate that we are seeing, the stuff that we had people testify to in our congressional hearings, I mean, that's not a joke. And what's even more interesting to this is that I was actually able to talk to David Grush, who now is actually working with the task force to kind of chase down a lot of these leads in regards to some of these contractors that allegedly have this tech, right? So in talking with him, again, not in a skiff, we were able to actually flesh out that prior to him testifying that he actually received very real threats against his life and his wife's life. He's a sound guy, and then shortly after he testified, there was this massive smear operation that was launched against him to try to discredit his testimony. And so, again, going into, well, if this stuff wasn't real or if he wasn't telling the truth, why would there be this massively orchestrated effort to, completely just disprove what he was trying to say or to discredit his actions and his testimony? And so it is kind of coming full circle, right? Going back to what the task force has been able to find out. I mean, we're conducting these investigations simultaneously, and we're doing this in addition to everything that to everything else that we have to do as members of Congress, right? So although I would love to just dedicate my full time and attention to this, we still have to balance it out. And so I've, again, had some great investigators who are working with us on oversight, as well as a lot of cooperation from the intelligence agencies. And we are going to be asking for this information to be declassified, at least information that has been shown to us.
I think the first break in the wall was that 2017 New York Times report where they were talking about it in logical, sensible language that these things might be from another world. But I think that movie that you're discussing, which is The Age of Disclosure,
yeah,
right?
I haven't seen it. Have you seen it?
It's very good.
Yeah.
It's very good. It's very good, and it doesn't even have any like UFO footage. I mean, maybe like a little bit.
It's just testimony.
It's just testimony. And at the end of it, you kind of draw this conclusion like, oh, this makes sense. Like this, what they're essentially saying is one of the problems is if they have been funding these secret programs, then for all these years, they've been misappropriating money.
Oh, yeah. And they've been lying to Congress.
And that's
Jinx.
Super illegal.
Very illegal.
It's
but,
super
it's
illegal.
Is Congress going to do anything about it? Because it's not the first time. Like, we have the ability, and this is the most frustrating thing. So this is my second term in Congress now. But as a first-term member of Congress, when you get elected to Congress, you would think that they would bring you in and they'd say, okay, this is how you do the legislation. No, you get elected, you show up to kind of a crash course for about like a week and a half on, how to not get in trouble with ethics. And then you're basically wined and dined by lobbyists. They don't actually tell you how to do the legislation. Basically, the only rules that you're told are never vote down a rule, which is a procedural motion to bring legislation to the floor, and don't really ever vote against your party, of which within the first week, I broke both rules. And so I was on the naughty list, per usual. But the thing is
they
that
tell you how to do it. That's kind of crazy.
Well, they tell you basically those are the two rules, and don't go against that, and you won't have any issues.
Those are big ass rules, though.
Yeah, because it's like you're supposed to represent your constituency. So if you have people calling your office saying, "Don't you vote for this," and then you vote against it, it's like people forget that you're supposed to represent, right, representative instead of just do what the party wants. But there are mechanisms that have existed since Thomas Jefferson, who wrote our damn rule manual, that enable us to actually pass legislation and actually hold agencies and people accountable from a punitive perspective. And I don't know if you were tracking, but like I brought a vote on the former attorney general for basically refusing to testify to Congress and respond to a subpoena. And that was called inherent contempt. And a lot of Congress was like, what the hell is inherent contempt? It hadn't been done since the early 1900s. And I actually read it in the rule manual, and I read the rule manual twice. So it's like so crazy what happens when you read books. But we were able to find this out, and it was a mechanism that Congress can use to actually basically send the sergeant at arms to go arrest people.
Jeez. Okay. So one of the things that this documentary was calling for that I think is the only logical way to solve this is a mass amnesty for these people that misappropriated money and
or whistleblowers.
Well, the whistleblowers thing is crazy. Like, they leave them alone. Like, come on. Of course, everybody should fucking know this stuff, guys. The real crime is you keeping this secret from humanity. That's the real crime. Okay? The other stuff is horseshit. It's just interpretations of what you're writing down on paper. You're making up rules. Mm-hmm. But if you ask the general public how they feel this should go, a rational, normal person would say, there's no fucking way the defense contractor should be the only people who know that we're not alone. Fuck you.
Especially
That's
when we're
crazy.
facing a massive deficit and you see that they're like the Pentagon hasn't been able to pass the audit and I don't know how many years.
All that stuff is
so
great,
crazy.
but just for humanity, that is a giant piece of information that no one should have. No one should secretly keep information that would change our entire perspective on our existence.
It's definitely wrong that it's happening, for sure. What I will tell you, though, is the issue that we have with bringing forward legislation that would give mass amnesty and pardon to these people is that there are people within the intelligence community and within Congress on both sides that will try to, if you come forward with this, and I'll tell you a very prime example of this in a moment, that they will block it. They don't want it to pass. They will stop it from even coming to the floor. They won't bring legislation that will address it because they want to keep this information secret. So Representative Tim Burchett
But why do they want to keep the information secret?
Because I think that their mouthpiece is in control of the deep state. And that's a thing. And it exists on both sides, okay?
So someone will come to them with marching orders.
100%. Representative Tim Burchett, before I got elected, was kind of on his own little island in regards to the UAP stuff. And he will himself tell you that, this is 100% like a thing, and that these defense contractors and what he believes, the Pentagon not passing audits, all this, these black budget programs. I mean, like, he will tell you he's, again, been leading out this effort way before I got there. He had a piece of legislation that was supposed to enable the FAA to report and develop a different reporting procedure for UAP stuff. And at the time, the chairman of Intel ensured that legislation was not brought forward, that it was stopped. The piece of legislation that actually passed out of the Senate, it really had no teeth to it. And then Representative Burchett drew a primary challenger that was being backed by the chairman of Intel. And so, when you are touching these, it's like, that meme where you have that stork that's like, don't touch this, and then the little foot comes out.
Yeah.
It's kind of like what we're doing, and it's not exactly easy because you will take heat from both sides. But it has been a good group that's been assembled that's bicameral, meaning it's both in the House and the Senate, and bipartisan, meaning both Democrats and Republicans are saying like, hey, this should actually happen.
Are they publicly talking about not releasing the information, or is all this stuff done in secrecy?
It's done behind the scenes.
Because if they had to do it publicly, if they had to announce their position on it publicly, it would be very damaging, I think, to anybody's political career on the right or the left.
People would be pissed, right?
Well, they're pissed. Yeah. Well, because I'm pissed. Because if they've had it for this long, I mean, if they really did recover something as early as 1947, excuse me.
Well, what I can tell you is for us specifically, we actually were made aware. Some people had come forward that said that they wanted to brief. So about 2 years ago when all this kicked off, we had requested briefings from Arrow that's in charge of kind of compiling the investigative aspect of UAP stuff. And by the way, from the get-go, like even in talking to Arrow, I was like, this organization is literally a BS organization. They're never going to tell us anything. And every interaction that we had in the skiff, I was like, this is a nothing burger. But then these people came forward and said that they were actually denied. They were told to not brief our group specifically on this topic, and that it was from, at the time, members of House leadership, but they wouldn't say who. And so I actually went with another member of Congress and confronted multiple people, and they all denying us access. So it's done behind the scenes. You'll see these random little troll blockages that might pop up. But what I can tell you is that with the new administration, specifically with the FBI, specifically with ODNI, we have gotten transparency to where previously we would have been stonewalled. We were actually given briefings. And so what I will tell you is we are going to push for the information that we saw to be out there for the American people to see.
So do you think that the whole idea of disclosure is maybe a multiple step, very agonizing, frustratingly slow process rather than a big dump of all the information that they've had from Roswell to the Aztec one to apparently there's a whole slew. I don't know if it's Aztec. I forget the name of it. But there was another during that same time period. There was a really prominent UFO recovery thing that was not as publicized as the one in Roswell. The big mistake with the Roswell one was the newspaper printed it. And so then they had to backtrack, and then they had to do the press conference where they had like some scattered pieces of a weather balloon that didn't look anything like a UFO.
And then
they said,
the Air Force was like, yeah, it was nothing.
Yeah, but meanwhile, they flew the wreckage to Wright Field. They flew the wreckage, and Truman met them there, supposedly.
Well, I can tell you in our hearing, we were actually notified, and you can pull this up. I think it was one of the witnesses had talked about what had happened at Vandenberg Air Base, where there was this thing that appeared over the base. It actually had multiple blotters reporting on it from phone calls into law enforcement from like hundreds of people. And whatever had appeared over the base was basically bigger than a football field and basically a red cube with some weird thing in the center of it. I actually had our witness draw this out. This guy is sober as a priest. I mean, was a great pilot, and he's talking about all this. And so, you talk about this stuff, it seems like a sci-fi movie, but based on the evidence that we've seen, I don't have any reason to believe that these people are lying. Based on the evidence that I've seen from our own government, I think that there's something there that the American people deserve to have access to. And so this is not just on this topic, but again, in other topics as well, this has been my perspective, is transparency is what builds trust. Other governments have revealed certain information on it. To think that we are the only, life form on this planet or in this galaxy, I think is a little bit crazy, given, the fact that I also think God exists and that there's other creations. But then again, you get into this aspect of, why is it that you also have this aspect of, a certain religion that has been very controlled and I think rolled out in a certain aspect. And, when you have certain books that are removed because they don't think that people should have access to this information or know it, why remove a book from a Bible, right?
Did Wes Huff, did he touch on that? Did he talk about that? Or are there people that don't believe the Book of Enoch was really a part of the Bible?
I don't remember how he discussed the missing books.
Yeah,
I think we brought it up, but I don't remember how.
That's the guy to talk to.
Yeah. So what I gather,
that's the guy to talk to about. You know what I mean? Because you have to really understand the history of the Bible to be able to figure out what's legitimate, what's not, why they put it into the New Testament. I had some very erroneous ideas about it until I talked to intelligent people that really know the history of it. And it's very strange stuff.
Well, so from what I gather, and by the way, I'm not a theologian in any capacity, but just from my personal opinion on this. So you have the Ethiopian Orthodox text, which has, I think, 88 books of the Bible in total. But in the Ethiopian Orthodox text, it's basically kind of like a mainline OG version of the Bible. And then sometime in the 4th century, there was actually a group that came together and they removed certain books. And the story goes that Revelations actually had replaced Enoch. And so it's interesting because when you're looking kind of full circle on, you hear the stuff that some of these people are talking about, and then you see and you read the Book of Enoch, which is a wild read, okay? And then you look at kind of what our modern day description is of what angels and entities are versus what Enoch was seeing and reporting in his language and ability at that time. I think that there's a lot that brings you to then ask the question, well, why would they remove this information? If it's truly, written in part of the oldest Bible in the world, why would they then take it out? And and water it down. And I'm not saying that you can't find God through the new Bible, right? Like everyone's on their own spiritual journey, and I think everyone can pray and you can access God. But I just find that very interesting. And so what I will say is that I like to have the whole kind of picture in front of me. And so I feel like to fully understand A through Z, you kind of have to be able to read it.
This is an ad for BetterHelp. The internet is a breeding ground for misinformation. Even a simple search for ways to get rid of a headache can produce millions and millions of results, from taking pain relievers to detoxes to medication to cold compresses. It's overwhelming. And even when you do find something that's true that works for other people, it might not work for you. In some cases, it's better to just ask a living, breathing expert. If you have a headache that won't go away, go talk to a doctor. And if you're struggling with your mental health, consult a credentialed therapist. You can learn a lot about yourself in therapy, like how to be kind to yourself and how to be the best version of you. Whether you want to learn how to better manage stress, improve your relationships, gain more confidence, or something else, it starts with therapy. Try it for yourself with BetterHelp. Millions have benefited from their services, and there's a reason people rate it so highly. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Talk it out with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/JRE. That's betterhelp.com/JRE. Yeah, I just don't know about the history of it. Is there any debate about the reality of that book? Is there any debate about whether or not it was either fraudulent or discredited or something?
The Book of Enoch?
Yeah. Like, why did they... Because I know there was some kind of controversy that Wes Huff described. I just can't remember it.
I just looked through a transcript real quick. I didn't see you guys discussing Enoch. We were discussing Isaiah and then the Dead Sea Scrolls and stuff like that. I didn't see Enoch discussion.
No, it must have been me privately talking to him about something, another video that I watched. The thing about like what Wes Huff does that's so interesting is like he really understands like the history of the text, the language in which they use, the names in which they chose. And when he breaks it out, one of the things he told us that was the craziest was that the book of Isaiah was exactly the same in the Dead Sea Scrolls as it was 1,000 years later. They found one that was 1,000 years older, and it was direct. It was word for word, verbatim. I'm like, that's bananas. 1,000-year-old story that's exactly the same, written, that they didn't know there was a version of it 1,000 years ago, and then they find it in these caves
it's confirmed
in Qumran.
In text.
It's nuts. It's really weird. It's really, really weird stuff.
And the fact that this kid, a shepherd kid, was able to even find these scrolls that they were set up, and just has led to that point right in time where he finds this massive, basically admission that the Bible's real. You can actually look into, there's the New King James, and then you can actually look into the Catholic Bible as well that also has, they call them apocrypha texts because the King James Bible doesn't acknowledge them, but there are also other books that are not considered, approved by the King James. So look, I was on my mom's side, I was actually raised Catholic and then had my catechism, did all of it. And then on my dad's side, I was raised Christian and then later on Messianic Jew. And so I feel like I kind of have like a good cross section and I've been exposed to a lot of this growing up. But it's definitely interesting. And so, look, I don't tell people, like, I'm not saying that like aliens created mankind. I don't believe that because at the end of the day, believe that God is responsible for our creation. But I do think that what we've been programmed to believe in regards to our ability to be able to use our mind, the spiritual aspect of us really does exist. And I think that once you kind of remove yourself out of this basically rat race and you can like really reconnect with that, I think that that's when you kind of realize, hey, there's a bigger purpose here in life and like what is our end objective. And if you're given a position of influence or a position of power and you're not doing the right thing for humanity, you're not guiding people, then that's something that you have to answer for. So I want to make sure that I'm good with God.
I hear you. That's a lot. I think these stories, especially when you get to stories like Noah and the Ark, that these stories exist in basically every religion. They're real similar. I think all of these people are trying to document a truth. Mm-hmm. It's just what is that truth is what where it gets weird. And when it gets to like other gods and giants created man.
Well,
and
Enoch talks
interbred with
about
man.
that.
Yeah, oh, I know.
Which is crazy.
I know. It's wild stuff. If it's legitimate, it's wild stuff. And then, do you know anything about the Ethiopian church that supposedly has the Ark of the Covenant in it?
Yeah, I've looked into that. I actually wanted to, and again,
Yeah, you're in the government. You can get
yeah.
something
So
done.
I actually wanted to do a Codel to just, but of course, like we're focusing on other things right
Send
now,
in
right?
seals. Find that fucking
I was
thing.
like, I need to pay for this for myself, so we're not using taxpayer dollars, but just go check it out. What's interesting is the CIA allegedly located the Ark of the Covenant. I think the
remote viewed.
they remote viewed it. You can actually find that. You should actually
In
pull it up.
Ethiopia?
No, not in Ethiopia, but it was in a Middle Eastern country. They weren't able to locate the actual. I think the New York Post did an article on it where they actually have the handwritten notes on the Ark of the Covenant location, and they remote viewed it. You should ask them to pull it up. Yeah, I'm serious about it.
Did they go there and see if they
I
were
don't know
correct?
if they did. I don't know. This is like Indiana Jones, but
What? Decades-old CIA documents on Ark of the Covenant resurfaced amid classified group text spat. What?
wait, like, yeah.
It was a group text argument that caused this stuff to be
No,
released?
check out, pull up the New York Post one because they actually have the handwritten notes from the remote viewer that actually documents it.
Okay.
It should be, I think it's like the New York Post.
That's so funny.
Oh, there you go.
There
Top
it
one. This is wild because it actually goes into descriptions of angels too. And so actually in Enoch it talks about, well, if you scroll down, now you can probably click on the scribed because it'll show you all the documents from the actual declassified file. This is also on CIA.gov.
What year was this?
This happened recently. This was like a couple months ago that this just kind of came all out.
Right, but what year was this project? Does it say?
1988.
88.
5 December 1988.
Wow.
So scroll down.
So in 88, they found the Ark of the Covenant?
Allegedly they remote viewed it. We don't know if they followed up
Who was
on
president back then? Reagan?
it. Go down.
Bush?
Senior. Okay, so scroll down and then you'll see that. So this is like, so they're going through in the notes. You have to read it, but you can scroll down. This is kind
So
of
this is, he's like drawing where it is.
the remote viewer. So you have like the different things that are describing it. And if you keep going, you'll see like a cherubim. Keep going.
He's like showing the peak of
Oh,
a
wait,
building.
sorry, go up a little bit. So that's interesting because if you look into so there's like a wheel text. If you look into Enoch's description of angels and Ezekiel too, I think that's kind of a tie, but go down more. So, but yeah, you have like the actual here, purpose of container. They should have like a cherubim drawing somewhere down here. Oh yeah, see, so that would be the seraphim. So it's
What is that?
interesting.
Would be the what?
The seraphim.
That's how it's opened.
Yeah, so basically when they describe the ark, and so he's going through describing it, so these are the hand notes for it, and then it actually says that it's in a Middle Eastern country. The remote viewer describes the clothing in which individuals are in the area. I feel like I'm describing like an Indiana Jones movie, but this is actually from the CIA.
This image, scroll back to where what is that thing? Is that the corner of the box?
The covenant, yeah. He's describing, if you go up, and these are actually the handwritten notes on what was described by the remote viewer. And you have to go through the entire document. But yeah, that's what's described surrounding the Ark.
Do you know what they asked him to find?
Well, the Ark of the Covenant.
They
you can
asked
find it in
him
the
to go
document.
look for the Ark of the Covenant.
It's if you go higher up in the documents, it's over there.
Right. But if you asked me to go look for the Ark of the Covenant, like, I know what I'm looking for, right?
Well, apparently these
put
remote
it in
viewers.
my head, I draw what I think it's going to, like, show me that they fucking found it. You know what I mean?
I don't know if they did, but they.
I don't know if
tried
they
to
did
find it.
either, but it's like, it's interesting, but it's not as interesting because you're saying, show me the Ark of the Covenant, right? So he's drawing what we all saw in Indiana Jones.
Or can you locate it?
That,
So the
what
descriptions.
year was that? That was before Indiana Jones?
No, it'd have been in the same time period. Like
When did Indiana Jones come out? What a great
The
movie.
90s, right?
I don't know. I'm thinking.
And like the first two are the best. The new ones are
Raiders of
good.
the Lost Ark was the first one. That's the one. What year was that?
1981.
Okay,
Yeah, there you
so
go.
Precursor.
that's 7 years earlier. Everybody saw that movie 100 times. You know what it looks like. You know what the Ark looks like. So if I tell you, go draw me the Ark, where's it at?
You think
All
that,
we have is some scribbles on paper unless they actually went there and found it.
Well, what's interesting, and I should probably ask Radcliffe,
were
like,
tasking
Radcliffe, can you
some
tell me if the CIA
What does it say,
ever
Jamie?
located the Ark of the Covenant?
What are you saying, Jamie?
It says the mission is to access and describe the target identified by coordinate, and then there's coordinates. The tasking is to see mission statement. Training target is the Ark of the Covenant.
So they did say, go find us the Ark of the Covenant. And then this dude apparently said,
Exhibits the ability to keep
keep AOL to a minimum. What is that?
I don't know. I saw that on the paper earlier.
Have to be careful with editing, though. This does not seem to be a problem at this time, just something to watch for. Attained excellent sight contact. Okay.
Definitely interesting.
Well, it's weird that they're talking about it like it's a real talent, like someone can actually do it.
This talks about mosque domes.
Yeah, target is in a container. This container is in another container. Has another container inside of it. The target is fashioned of wood, gold, and silver. The target is similar in shape to AOL. So that's something of location, right? Is that what it means?
Area of location.
Yeah, that's it. Coffin, and is decorated with the seraphim. See sketch. This target is located somewhere in the Middle East, as the language spoken by individuals present seemed to be Arabic. Well, wouldn't you want someone who could fucking decipher Arabic to do this?
We don't know how far it went, and I definitely have questions, but this would not be the first time that a government would have looked for something, especially because people theorize that the Ark of the Covenant had these abilities as a super weapon.
I know, but I'm saying like the remote viewer is limited by his ability to understand the language. Stop. Scroll back up, please. There, right there. So it's somewhere in the Middle East. Visuals of surrounding buildings indicated that the presence of mosque domes. Individuals in the area were clothed in virtually all white, had black hair and dark eyes. One figure I honed in on wore a mustache. The target is hidden underground, dark and wet, were all aspects of the location of the target. See, the only problem I ever have with these things is if these places are all controlled by terrorists and it's all, dictators and crazy people over there. If they found out that the Ark was there, they would fucking take it.
Well, I think there's this aspect of, if you look at from a biblical perspective, no one would be able to access it anyways because it would be protected, right? That's what the Bible says.
It says here too. Cannot be opened until the time is deemed correct.
Oh, Jesus. Once the time to open the container, the mechanisms of lock systems will be found to be fairly simple. Individuals opening the container by prying or striking are destroyed by the container's protectors.
Well, what's interesting is, remember, in the Bible, it always talks about how there had to be like a...
Through the use of a power unknown to us.
They melt you, remember?
Bro, yeah.
Well, so they had to, go through this special process of being considered, holy, basically, to access it. So all that to say that there's something out there, right? I think that obviously God's real, and this job has definitely, put me in a position to where we're able to help get other truths out there, if you will. And
you need to get the truth of that thing out there. They need to find out.
Dear Director Radcliffe,
you know how much
look at
the
the Ark of
world
the
would
Covenant?
change if you found the actual Ark of the Covenant, and you could explain a lot of things. Like, look, if these Ethiopians have it, which Graham Hancock believes,
Allegedly, they do.
Yeah, Graham Hancock believes that they do. And he said that these guardians, they all get cataracts, and they die of like radiation poisoning. I
mean, there's something to be said about the Ethiopian people as a whole, and going back to the Ethiopian Orthodox text. Actually, when I first launched this task force, I actually went and I met with a Ethiopian Orthodox pastor, if you will, just to kind of see and explain and ask questions that I can't exactly go to, the Smithsonian and ask. And his response was interesting, especially from their perspective. You have a lot of this aspect of, I think, religion that tries to be doom and gloom. And then in the Ethiopian perspective, he's like, first of all, your timeline's wrong. And I'm like, what do you mean your timeline? He's like, well, the biblical text in modern day Christianity, it's a little bit off, right? So we use a completely separate, I think it's 364 days out of the year. And he's explaining all of it. And he's like, but even then, so, we don't have the perspective of, we are in the end of days, etc. But, the way his perspective just seemed very optimistic as opposed to pessimistic and filtering and controlling information. All that
He's
to
probably
say,
not online.
He's off X. He's off X.
He's off X. He's off TikTok.
Yeah, he's not subjecting himself.
The New York
to
Post thing about that says that the viewer was identified with the target and didn't know what it was, and it ended up being the Ark of the Covenant after all the explanation they found.
Oh, well, that's much different.
Yeah.
So that whole thing at the end of it was what they were saying it was when they wrote it in that report.
If you look at all it's just a bunch of words they're putting together, and
Got it.
Hearing Hal Puthoff talk about it. They're just
that's
feelings.
way more interesting. If he didn't know what he was looking for and he found something that looked like the Ark of the Covenant, that's pretty crazy.
They kind of talk them on, right? They'll give them something and say walk us through.
I'm just doing devil's advocate because I have no skin in the game. I don't know if it's real or not real. I'm open to it. I think there's something going on. I think there's more going on with people than we let on. There's some extra thing that's happening with human beings, the way we're all connected to each other that we don't really totally understand. And I think the idea that you can access information that's not local, I don't think that's that weird. I think that might be an emerging aspect of human consciousness, or an aspect of human consciousness that's atrophied.
Or just an aspect of spirituality that we've previously forgotten, because we're in such a digital age that kind of programs you into the rat race. And I think people, the more that they're kind of like, there has to be more to life than just like a 9 to 5. And, working for this aspect of materialism, like, don't get me wrong, I like, a nice car and a clean house and all that. But, there's also this aspect of, being a human. And like, if you have kids, I think that's like one of the things, like you have a daughter, I have a son. And it's like when you're a parent, it kind of like makes you realize like, wow, there's this aspect of like love that I didn't know existed before. And you can kind of really be there and help, grow this next human and influence that person. And it just kind of, the human experience is something that, you can make it as special as you want. And this aspect of, us being able to have those little quantum breadcrumbs is what I like to call them. Like, have you ever been like talking about something and like you'll go somewhere, hear something, and there's like confirmation of what you've been talking about, or, something happens and you're like, asking a question, then all of a sudden it pops up, kind of there's the answer. And I think that those little things just mean you're on the right path and doing what you're supposed to do in this bigger picture.
Yeah, well, that's a good way to live life. If you believe that, it's healthy, it's smart. It's like a good strategy. I wonder, like, why some people seem to have, like, the idea of it being an emerging aspect of human consciousness, our ability to, like, sense things and know things that are going to happen, or our
premonition,
ability, or know if someone's a liar or a weirdo, like, instantly. I always wonder if, is it that, or is it that we used to have that, like, before language, that's all we had?
I think that before tech really evolved, there was a bigger aspect of spirituality that actually talks about that. So like discernment in the Bible, you can talk about, this aspect of being, people say like, oh, if someone has like really bad energy, you picking up on it. There's something to that. But I think that because, and it's really happened, I think, in the last like 40 years where people are kind of forgetting that. But when you actually go back to, like, for example, we're talking just now about the Ark of the Covenant, the Ethiopian Orthodox text and all of this, there's more of that aspect of spirituality that I think has been removed from society. I think it's actually taken away our ability to really respect one another and value human life. And I think that, from like a Politico perspective, influences decision. Like, you get really pro-war people. Those people are usually not that spiritual, and they really don't have a value for life in that aspect.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a real thing. That's unfortunate that there's a... And the fact that those are the type of people that always want to be in power.
They're the worst
really
type.
Scary. That's probably the scariest part of it.
I actually had a really groundbreaking conversation. So like the way I'll describe Congress is, you ever have like a job where 80% of it, 90% of it's just like really eating shit. And then like the 10% is like really cool.
Yeah.
And it makes up for that like 80, 90% that you're just like,
That's when I hosted Fear Factor.
Okay. So
kidding.
that aspect of, I think really exists in politics if you like actually care.
Sure.
And I had a meeting recently where I was with 2 other members of Congress that were helping me with the JFK investigation. And we actually met for the first time since 1990 with the ambassador to the Russian government. And I bring that up because at the time of the JFK assassination, the KGB had actually come forward with their own independent investigation, and they actually gave it at Kennedy's funeral to U.S. officials. We never got those documents, and it's my belief that the CIA actually destroyed that information and evidence because it would have confirmed what the KGB. And mind you, at the time, JFK was actually in talks with the president of Russia at that time, and his perspective is that he actually wanted to do a joint mission between the U.S. government and the Russian government to the moon. And there are aspects and divisions within the intelligence community. You obviously saw the Cold War was happening. They wanted war in Cuba. They wanted war with Russia. So for them to be able to say that Kennedy, who was not a communist, but that he was a communist sympathizer, and how dare he talk to these dirty communists. I mean, that in itself would have given them any ammunition to turn a blind eye or at least not fully figure out who assassinated Kennedy. But I bring that up to say that, when you have these people in power, you can see a lot of it in regards to, there's a summit on the 15th actually with President Trump and Vladimir Putin. And I think the aspect of, anytime you have peace and trade, it's way better than war for everyone involved, for the people of Ukraine, for Russia, for the American people. And I think for the surrounding regions, like I recently got back from meeting with government officials in Romania and Moldova. And it didn't matter and I actually met an actual member of the Moldovan government who was a communist, like an outward communist. And it didn't matter who I talked to, everyone wanted peace. And then when we had met with the European Parliament and the EU, some of them wanted peace, but then the countries that had the shittiest economies, excuse my language, they were the ones that were advocating for war. Well, you have a war-based economy. It always helps your economy. So if you have terrible policy perspectives, obviously you would advocate for something like that. But it just goes to show that the people that are going through it, the people that are living it, that are directly impacted it, no one would advocate for war. And so in even just having this conversation, a lot of people, even, administration ago, maybe 2 administrations ago, probably would not have had that conversation. But to be able to develop that dialogue, the end result of that meeting was the Russian government agreed to release their investigation onto JFK that the previous congressional task force in the 90s had tried to obtain from the Russian government, and they said no. So they agreed to release that, and they'll be posting it publicly for the American people to go through later on this fall.
Have you seen it yet?
I haven't.
No.
So I'll be seeing it at the same time everyone else does.
What do you think is in there, if you had to guess? So
when I was talking to the ambassador, he's actually a history buff too. And so he had actually said that the Russian government, when Oswald was actually in Russia, had done a psychological profile because they thought, they're like, is this guy part of American intelligence? Like, what's his story? And they thought he was basically nuts. And apparently he tried to go hunting when he was out there, and they were observing him, and he couldn't shoot for shit. So they're like, he didn't meet our psychological profile. Then he shows up to the Russian embassy in Mexico City with a gun, and they're like, what the hell is it? Like crazy guys showing up at that? Like, what's going on? And then we find out simultaneously as this is all happening that the CIA, kudos to Director Radcliffe, had actually released something called the Joanides file. And George Joanides was actually, he's basically our version of James Bond, but more corrupt. And he was basically observing Oswald. He had lied to Congress. This was all in his file. He was then the CIA liaison to Congress during the investigations, stonewalled their investigations, was later awarded something from the CIA. So we have the CIA admitting that they lied to Congress, covered up the assassination attempt, or covered up the investigations. We had admissions from the Warren Commission, people that had been subject to the Warren Commission's investigation, saying that the Warren Commission engaged in witness intimidation. They omitted evidence. The single bullet theory never exists. The CIA admits that Lee Harvey Oswald was not a lone gunman. People ask, well, does this mean that you'll ever get the name of who killed him? No, because I don't think the CIA was like, kill JFK on this day and use this gun and have this person assigned.
Right.
But there was evidence of multiple shooters for sure.
Well, there had to be multiple shooters. There's injuries, like one of them was to the front of his neck.
We had testimony to that.
Yeah.
And actually, what's interesting is when we first launched the task force, we had left-leaning news outlets that were trying to write hit pieces saying that I was basically launching a conspiracy theory task force. And they had to print the truth weeks ago. You can actually pull
up. What is it about people that don't want to believe that some conspiracies are real? Is it a comfort thing? Is it you think you're going to erode trust in the government? Is it you just have such a rigid worldview, and in your mind that there's always been Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, that's what happened, and because of that, anything that challenges your belief system, you fight against?
Well, specifically to JFK, for decades, the intelligence agencies were influencing what the print and press was doing.
100%. Until Geraldo Rivera. When Dick Gregory brought that film on the Geraldo Rivera show, and you got to see the Zapruder film, and you got to see what looks like a shot that makes his head go back and to the left.
Yeah, and
which would indicate he got shot from the front. I think he got shot multiple times by multiple shooters from multiple different directions, and I don't think necessarily Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't in on it.
Well,
here's the problem. People say, oh, Lee Harvey Oswald couldn't shoot. You don't have to be that good with a rifle to be you're on a ledge, so you have a secure rest. If your rifle's sighted in, and they said his scope was off, but that doesn't mean shit because you could just drop your scope and it's off. All you have to do is take your rifle off of that ledge, drop it on the ground, and now that scope is off. You never drop your gun like that. And if you do, you can knock your scope off.
Well, there's multiple problems, though, because the Warren Commission actually never even put into the report, right? So, like, if you're
Well, let me finish.
Okay.
My point is, that wasn't a far shot. It was like, what was it, 140 yards from the book depository to with a scope?
Yeah,
and
he
a
should have been able to
rifle
take
with
the
a rest.
shot.
No, you could kill a guy like that, and he could have been the shooter.
Mm-hmm.
He could have been one of the shooters. But I think there's too much witness testimony. There's too much evidence. The whole idea of the magic bullet theory was just because they had to account for all the wounds in the bodies with just 3 bullets. And they found a guy who got hit in the underpass rather. He got hit with a ricochet.
Yep.
Yeah. So now they knew that bullet couldn't have hit Kennedy or Connolly. So how do you attribute all these wounds to 2 different guys from multiple gunshots to a single bullet?
It's a magic bullet, don't you know?
You have to
Rick?
find this bullet that fucking for sure didn't hit any bones. And there's more fragments in Connolly's wrist than there were missing from the bullet. The bullet looks almost pristine. It looks like they shot it through like feathers, or they shot it into water, which is what they do when they do ballistics tests on rifles.
Well, what's interesting is the Warren Commission did omit multiple female witnesses who were actually at the book depository that day that actually stated that they had never witnessed Oswald actually in the location or going down the back of the book depository. So that's an interesting fact.
Yeah, it's possible that he could have snuck past them. There was a lot of chaos. You hear gunshots, the president shot. People don't always think straight when things are going nutty. People have a terrible memory right after traumatic events.
Yeah.
Like, yes and no. Like, he might have been there or he might not have been there. He might have shot at Kennedy or he might not have shot at Kennedy. But for sure, he was some sort of government operative. For sure, he was traveling back and forth from Russia. He married a Russian citizen. There was a lot of weird shit
He was
with
under
that guy.
surveillance by the CIA.
Yeah.
So there's a lot there. However, I will say this. What the official narrative was, we now know is BS, right?
Yeah.
And
Well, that I thought from the beginning.
Yeah, but a lot of the American people did, but to have their own government say, no, that's not true, to gaslight them and to push this narrative of if you question it, you're wrong, you're crazy. That in itself, I think when you're talking about like why do the American people not trust their government, it's really this fracture that starts around the Kennedy era and time frame. And you can see then that distrust kind of evolves. But going back to your original question, why do people refuse to kind of question conspiracy theory? Maybe there's some substance to it. And I think it's because it's more comfortable for people from a psychological perspective to live in this comfort area that their government might not do something like that.
Right.
Or might not try to cover up something like that because that's just an easy way of life. But look,
It's too scary.
it's too scary. But the fact is that, look, I've traveled a lot. I've dealt with a lot of world leaders. We are still the greatest country in the world. Make no excuse about that. But it doesn't mean that we can't call out and hold our own government and officials accountable. And so that's kind of what I've guess my mission has been this Congress and what I hope that it will continue to be. But I'm not trying to do this for like even the next 10 years. So for someone like me, people are like, oh, initially you're going to ruin your political career talking about this. This is crazy. Why would you even want to do that? And then, they're seeing all these big wins coming out in regards to transparency. And I will say, had it not been for the secretaries that have been appointed by this administration, this wouldn't have happened because under President Biden, he actually also tried to declassify things pertaining to JFK, and the National Archives never released it. And so in addition to...
That's not a good sign. None of that stuff's a good sign. Like, if you want trust from the American people, you release information. If you want us to distrust you, you hide everything. And you're hiding everything on one of the most important events in human history.
They were up until recently. And we're still documents that the JFK community, because mind you, I'm actually working with, his name's Jefferson Morley. He is not a Republican. He's a Bernie Sanders Democrat. But on this issue, we're working great together. And he's actually been helping me. And he's like, look, I've been waiting for this stuff for like 30 years.
Yeah, this is a hugely bipartisan issue.
It's super bipartisan.
This
and
is something we can all get together. That and UFOs. Like, it's the one thing Democrats and Republicans both completely agree on. Like, tell us what's up. Tell us what's up. Who killed them and are they real? Those are two giant questions that we all have.
I think they're real. The other part is still outstanding, but hopefully when the documents are released from the Russian government later on this fall, that might be able to provide a full picture. Granted, I'm going to take it with a grain of salt because it's still, it was written by the KGB. But at the end of the day, we have a good mosaic that's been put together with at least the documents that have been released with this administration. And for any outstanding documents, I actually have a team assigned to me from the CIA that is actually helping me chase down these documents. And I've already had some interesting experiences, like not creepy, but for example, after President Trump signed the executive order, and Radcliffe has been super helpful, we actually were made aware of this. Allegedly, there had been a document that was at the CIA that was a report from the Inspector General that had implicated the CIA allegedly in the assassination of JFK. So I'm following up on this lead and trying to find this report. And the archives is like, we don't have any documentation of this. The CIA says they don't have any documentation. And they've been good with us so far. So I go to the archives because they're like, we found this weird bag though, and it's in the skiff, and it's been here for 5 years, and it was left by our former attorney for the archives, and so we don't know what's in it. And I was like, well, go open it. They're like, well, we don't have the key, and it's in a vault. And I said, well, I'm coming over. So I drive over, literally, I like put my son in the car. I get in the car and I go over to the National Archives. We go into the skiff. I pull out this bag and I'm like, does anyone have scissors? And we like cut open this little folder, and there was a CD-ROM in it, and this has again been declassified now, so I can talk about it. But there was this CD-ROM of a ton of wires from the State Department. Some of the wires were pertaining to the Kennedy family, and it was actually a WikiLeaks document. And so I think the reason why it was kept at the archives is because you're not actually supposed to have these documents on government computers. WikiLeaks obviously don't happen with that. But here I was like cutting it out of a bag at the National Archives.
That makes sense that you would have the most top secret documents burned on CD-ROMs. That way no one could ever get access to it by hacking into your computer.
To this day, I don't know even who left the CD-ROM. I don't know. And there's some other stuff in that I don't need to get into. But
why don't you need to get into it?
Because I don't want to get in trouble. But the stuff that was on there was interesting. And I think I saw recently Tulsi had actually talked about some of the State Department wires that had been found and I think these are the same ones that had talked about the assassination of RFK. There were wires going up from the State Department prior to his assassination, which is interesting. So our next investigation, so we've done multiple hearings.
What do you mean by that? Like, how did they specifically discuss it?
Well, I haven't seen the actual wires themselves yet, but what that would imply is that the State Department knew about the assassination before it took place.
Oh, geez.
So, and that was something she talked about.
Did you get into the MK Ultra stuff at all with Jolly West?
So I look at that on my free time, but that's not the purview of the task force. But there's stuff that you can, again, CIA.gov/reading room, super creepy. I did find a document on the archives website that actually ties the initial phases of the MK Ultra program to Operation Paperclip.
Oh, boy.
Interesting. And
that makes sense. Right?
It is there, and I'm reading this to my husband.
Because for sure, the Nazis were experimenting on drugs with people.
They're doing a lot of bad stuff.
Oh, they were doing a lot of horrible stuff. But for sure, they were experimenting on their soldiers and on prisoners, and they were experimenting on all kinds of people.
Creepy stuff.
Yeah, and if we took some of that and applied it, the Jack Ruby connection to it is that Jolly West went to visit Jack Ruby after he shot Lee Harvey Oswald. And Jack Ruby was like pretty rational before then. And then after Jolly West leaves, he's like freaking out, seeing things that aren't there. I think he said something about Jews he could see Jews burning alive.
It's like a psychosis state.
Full on, lost it. Most likely got dosed the fuck with acid. Most likely Jolly West just hit him with a fucking giant...
That's a terrible way to go.
...shot glass of acid. It doesn't, like, he went so far off the deep end. Then he died later. I think he died a few years later of cancer, but I think he completely lost his mind after Jolly West visited him. And Jolly West he was involved with the Manson family thing. He was involved with Operation Midnight Climax, where they had brothels. The CIA was running brothels, and they would get these Johns to come in with the prostitutes, and the prostitutes would give them acid, and they didn't know it. And so they were sitting there, and there was two-way mirrors, and they were filming them. Why these guys were like, well, for blackmail, for observation. They knew these people were never going to say, hey, you did that to me. You know, look what the government did. It dosed me up with acid. Because they're not going to admit they went to a brothel.
Well,
so you have like the perfect group of people to victimize and just try stuff on.
Well, and they got in trouble for it too. Like the CIA had to do payouts. They were getting sued for it. And then when all this did flush out, I mean, you know, it's always. I feel like
the Freedom of Information Act was the only, and then they found a bunch of documents. They found documents that were, I forget Tom O'Neill, who wrote the book Chaos, goes into great detail about this.
Well, it's interesting.
It's all about the Manson family and MK Ultra. It's a fantastic book.
Well, even just this conversation right now, there's such a stigma that exists around it because it's such a spooky topic.
Yes.
And so it's
you don't want to look stupid.
You don't want to look stupid. And so look, anyone watching this can go look at this information. Go to CIA.gov/reading room, and no, it's not going to be a phishing website that's going to steal your information. But like you can find.
Oh, for sure it is.
The CIA is like, where are we accessing?
For sure.
But it's always been one of those things, and if people ask me, I'm just very transparent about it. And I will say something that started out with a stigma of being, this conspiracy theory investigation, wasting taxpayer dollars, has been arguably one of the coolest task force in Congress, I think. And we have a lot of good people that are behind it. And
I think the tide is turning on that kind of thinking, that these conspiracy theories are silly to pursue. Like some of them, yeah. Some of them are silly.
Some are crazy, but some are true.
But that doesn't mean that some aren't true. Also, there's a time-honored tactic of taking – look, if I was an intelligence community, and I'm not accusing anybody of doing this, but if I was an intelligence community and I had some truth that was very inconvenient to a narrative – and I wanted to label that truth as being a preposterous conspiracy theory, I'd add a bunch of kooky shit to it.
Or have disinformation campaigns.
Or dole it out to the nuttiest people on the internet. Dole it out to the craziest people. This guy's got a drinking problem. He's got a conspiracy theory website.
Or take a little and spin it.
Him.
Yeah.
Get it to him and tell him you're helping him out. You're going to give him some inside information. Get him to spread a bunch of kooky stuff so that when that stuff gets disproven, the other thing's attached to it. So the other thing looks stupid too. And that's what I would do.
Yeah, we've had our fill. Like the one thing I wanted to do when I first got the task force is open up a skiff to any person who held a clearance to come brief us on what they knew about UAPs. And I can tell you that we've now had
what was
the skiff.
First conversation like when the door shuts and you're like, oh boy, I'm gonna get the goods.
The problem is I've reached out to some of the biggest names in UFO lore. Okay, and they all got skiff flu, and we call it skiff flu, meaning like the day that the skiff was open that we reserved it, we're like, we're here, like come brief us. They get sick or their dog dies.
And they didn't recover and come back?
They didn't recover, and then they just don't talk to us anymore. So
they ghost you?
They ghost us. Yeah, so I'm like, well, if you're not going to tell me to skiff, then you're full of crap.
Or you're scared for your life because you're just a scientist who doesn't, maybe they got threatened. Maybe someone let them know that maybe someone hung something on their door in the middle of the night.
But if people say they're going to go tell us in a skiff and then they don't show up, it's a problem, right?
Well,
so they've already gone public.
But maybe those people don't feel like the government's going to protect them.
That is one of the biggest things that we've had people bring up is that you're a whistleblower, but whistleblower protections only go so far, and you can't do anything for my physical safety. And some of them do allege that there's these actual physical concerns. We actually had someone that we wanted to bring in to testify because our next hearing on UAP is going to be, I believe it's next month. And the individual that was actually told to us by David Grush is actually a former combat controller. And so my husband, Air Force Special Operator, combat control. But so we knew the guy via some friends. So we knew that the guy wasn't nuts or crazy, and reached out to him, and he did not want to come in. He wanted nothing to do with it, was like, I'm not touching this. And so, that stuff like that happens.
Well, also, you put those folks on TV, right?
Well, we don't have to. We can do private, but if we testify.
If it comes time where they have to testify,
yeah.
And there's a lot of time in between people finding out that this guy came and told you guys what's up to testify.
Don't freak out our witnesses, Jeff.
But that's the problem. This is why what I was talking
now.
about is what's being advocated in the documentary that to me makes perfect sense is mass amnesty. Now, here's the bad part. For sure, you're dealing with enormous sums of money, and I'm sure people got really rich off of that, and I'm sure it's super illegal if it's real.
Back engineering potential?
Yeah. I mean, and also the competitive advantage you would give company A if this company gets access to a down craft that can traverse space and time, that can move through the universe instantaneously, that utilizes an unknown element, that has some unknown process of defying gravity. It's utilizing no interior mechanisms of control. Everything is done with the mind of the pilot. If this is the truth, if this is what they're saying, and these are the kind of things they find, that getting to a contractor would be a massive advantage over the other contractor that also should be on equal standing with the government, right? Mm-hmm. They both make jets. They both make whatever it is. So it's like, what do? Do you divvy up your spaceships in between these folks? Like, are they the only ones who get to know it? And then how do private contractors, how are they the gatekeepers of the most important information in the world, if it's true?
Well, and that brings us to what happened at Eglin Air Force Base. So in a nutshell, we had been told Representative Gates had come forward and said that he had two or three pilots that had contacted him saying that the Air Force was covering up information regarding to UAP activity in the Panhandle, and he wanted us to go with him to investigate. So we show up at Eglin Air Force Base. We're met by the base commander. Previous to us even showing up on this congressional delegation to investigate, the Pentagon had tried to cancel the meeting. And you can't, so this was under the last administration, so you can't just cancel a meeting and say you can't come to the base. That doesn't work. So Gates actually was on House Armed Services at the time that oversees the U.S. military. And so Gates got the chairman involved, calls back onto the Pentagon, gets this meeting on the books. And, we told them specifically, we want to see information on UAPs, we want to see the evidence, and we want to have the pilots that saw these aircraft, whatever they are, or these spacecraft, we want to have briefings from them. In a nutshell, we get to Eglin Air Force Base. They keep BSing us about the Chinese spy balloon. That's not what we were there to see. And ultimately, we were in the skiff. We got into a verbal disagreement with the base commander at the time, who was denying us access to the pilots and to the information, and said that we didn't have the authorization. In the skiff, there was many members of the intelligence community. We then go back upstairs to the conference room and proceed to, again, basically have it out with this commander. And Representative Burchett said, we could do this the easy way or the hard way. You choose, sir.
Like a movie. Ooh.
Kind of, but it was at the time.
I like it when people use a movie.
Yeah, easy way or the hard way. And if it's the hard way, you're going to have, Representative Gates and Luna in D.C. questioning you. So I suggest you do it the easy way. So he actually, in the middle of the meeting, we were kind of holding his feet to the fire on it. He kind of got nervous as we were talking to him. And I kid you not, he goes, they're going to like that I'm not going to let you see this. So he kind of was thinking out loud, but didn't realize that he was basically saying it. And then in the middle of our meeting, he gets up and leaves the room. I have to go to the restroom or something. And then maybe 5 minutes later, this tech sergeant comes in and says, oh, the base commander's been authorized to go on leave to Georgia. He won't be coming back. And I'm sitting there looking at Gates and Burchett. I'm like, he just left, in the middle of a congressional delegation? That's never happened.
So he said out loud, they would be happy that I'm not telling you?
Yeah. Verbally articulated it. Gates was there. My husband was there.
But here's the
Burchett
thing.
was there.
It's just if that guy's, he's in a powerless situation, right? If he does give you access,
he's going to get in trouble.
He might be really in trouble.
But here's the problem. He can't, even if it was someone at the Secretary of Defense, right? Because at the time, this got pretty high level.
I'm not saying it's not illegal.
Yeah. He still, at the end of the day, you're in the military. How our government functions is the military does not decide what the civilian sector and what representatives can and cannot see. It's not supposed to function like that. So he got up and left. I've never seen this happen. I was in the military. I've never seen, in the middle of a congressional delegation, these are big deals. You just get up and go and leave to Georgia and you just don't come back, in the middle of the meeting. It never happens.
What state were you in at the time?
We were in Florida.
Oh,
he just,
that's
hilarious. Get up and, drove to Georgia. What the hell are you doing in Georgia in the middle of a congressional delegation?
I'm going fishing.
See ya. And then his second in command comes in, and they managed to get one pilot to come down and brief us. And what I will tell you is, I will say it, Representative Gates has gone on record. He actually did as soon as he left office that we've seen stuff that I don't believe was created by mankind.
So you can't tell us what you saw, but
I'm going to let you infer.
See, this is the problem that I have with all this stuff.
I should be able to tell you without losing my clearance.
Well, not just that. That people that have that information should give that information to the general public.
Correct.
And stop treating us like you're smarter than us and that you can handle it and we can't. That's silly.
Which is why we have to declassify, which is why...
the Hal Puthoff stuff?
No.
It's okay. Hal Puthoff, during the Bush administration, was assigned, he was one of many scientists, and this is also in the age of disclosure. He was one of many scientists that was assigned to put a numerical value to pros and cons of UFO disclosure. So they said to him, we have a crashed UFO that we have been back engineering, and we want to release information to society to let people know that UFOs are real and that there is something else out there that's not us, that's much more intelligent than we are. So they have this list of pros and cons: banking, religion, societal structure, everything on one side. And then the pros, like, whatever the positive aspects of it would be. And every single scientist said that the cons outweighed the pros. And he said, I would have loved to have had disclosure, but this was just what they asked me to do. They asked me to compile numbers and to do it in a way that's super objective. And he said, if I'm doing my job, this is where I think it would completely wreck our government, completely wreck any idea that the people that are in charge of us have any position of authority. When there's something that can go 100 million times faster than we think is physically possible through the universe, appear out of nowhere, stop all of our nuclear programs, shut down bases, do weird shit.
But don't you think that that's where kind of it's been interesting, because society has moved away from this aspect of like having a spiritual grounding and even believing in, like, most people today, I think when you talk about like praying, even that whole concept is kind of just like, they're just. And I feel like that thing's kind of poo-pooed, but if you have like a grounding in that, and going back to what I was saying earlier, I think that that's not like, I don't think that society would do that. Granted, I'm not a scientist, I'm not running numbers, but just based on how we've kind of been evolving with access to information and kind of the questions, the discussions that have been happening, not just here, but I think internationally, I just think a lot's changing. Now, to say that we were, and I've heard some wild theories, like people think that, humanity was seeded by UFOs, and that's I don't agree with that theory. I'm going to address it because
it's a fun one.
It's an interesting theory.
If you found out it was true, would you tell everybody?
I mean, I'd be transparent about it, but I just don't personally believe it.
But would you believe it if you found out that was the information that the government had?
Well, I'd put it out there because that's what I'm
right. But
supposed
what
to do.
would that do for your belief system?
That would suck.
But would it suck, really? Maybe that's what's confusing about the Bible. Maybe what's confusing is that it was an oral tradition for hundreds, if not 1,000 years before it was ever written down, right?
Well, I think that it depends on what book you're talking about, right? So, like,
but I
if you
mean,
have
the
books
Old
written by
Testament,
prophets.
if you go back to the oldest works of the Bible, weren't most of those stories handed down generation after generation and then eventually written down?
Written into text. Well, some of them are written by prophets, but I mean, Enoch is apparently supposed to predate even the time of Genesis and talk.
The nuttiest one is Ezekiel.
I'm telling you, Enoch is even crazier than Ezekiel.
Oh, I've read. I just don't. Did you find anything about whether or not Enoch is controversial?
You can look up the 4th century.
It was discluded as, I guess, since the 5th century. It wasn't in canon.
Sorry, 5th century.
And why did it get discluded?
It says the Jewish scribes or the priests didn't believe, the rabbis didn't believe it was canon.
Huh.
So it's regarded as scripture.
But what's interesting is that even if that's the case, though, you have the Ethiopian Orthodox Church that actually there's Ethiopian Jews, and that's considered the most pure form of the Bible. So, like, you actually have a division of like the Ethiopian Jewish class that actually recognized Enoch.
How weird is it that some rabbis 500 years ago made a call?
But that's what I'm saying is, like, you
1,500
can't though discredit it because
that's kind of weird.
But you can't discredit it because, again, like when you have people removing books, I think, look, and I'm not telling people what to believe. I'm just saying you should take a look at it.
Oh, here it is. The main reason for the Jewish rejection of the book is that it's inconsistent with the teachings of the Torah. From the standpoint of rabbinic Judaism, the book is considered to be heretical. Another reason for the exclusion of the text might be the textual nature of several early sections of the book that make use of material from the Torah. For example, Enoch is a midrash of Deuteronomy 33. The context, particularly detailed descriptions of fallen angels, would also be reason for rejection from the Hebrew canon at this period, as is illustrated by the comments of Trypho the Jew when debating Justin Martyr on this subject. The utterances of God are holy, but your expositions are mere contrivances, as is plain from what has been explained by you, nay, even blasphemous, for you assert that angels sinned and revolted from God.
So it was
It seems like some people made a decision that something shouldn't be in there.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is it's a disagreement in religion and perspective, but they should have still not removed it. And so it's interesting because then you have, the evolution of what the King James Bible is. We all know that story. He wanted to get remarried. They rewrote it. But you even have the Catholic Bible that has, it's what happened.
Right.
And you have the Catholic Bible that had books that were taken out, and then we have the King James. So I'm not saying that, if you read the King James, you're not getting... you don't have access to God. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that there's a bigger picture here that we need to discuss. And I think
there's always a problem when people get involved. And when people get involved in making decisions that this could be real and this could not be. The problem is, like, all these years later, you're dealing with the repercussions of that. Like, imagine a world in which if Enoch was left in the Bible and people were like, wait, what happened? Like, explain the nuttiness of the Book of Enoch to people.
Well, it's okay. So if you read it, it talks about the fall of angels, thus creating really the precursor of civilization that led to the first flood. I think that when you even go into potentially the technology that was given to mankind by these angels, it talks about the hidden beliefs and theories in astronomy, etc., metalworkings, all of it. But it really does explain, you were talking about earlier how you have a lot of these religions around the world that kind of say the same thing. This is kind of the OG text that leads to those stories that we're hearing from many religions around the world. To talk about angels mixing with mankind and then seeding a super essentially race of humans that essentially were responsible for basically damning mankind to the flood. I mean, you hear about stuff in Greek and Roman mythology, people who had these super crazy powers. And you talk about it out loud and it sounds crazy, but that's what the book says. And then the fact that it was taken out and then it's poo-pooed, yet you have one of the oldest religions in the world via the Ethiopians that actually still have it. You have, the Catholic Church that has books that are missing out of the King James Version. I'm just saying that, when you read it, you should read it and decide for yourself. Don't listen to what I'm saying. Don't listen to what you're saying, but truly give it a chance and see what you have to say. And then, you're going back to this whole concept of if you have this information pertaining to UAPs, whatever they might be, the origins. I mean, if you have a understanding of what Enoch was talking about, kind of makes sense.
Well, I go back to my thoughts on all this stuff. It's like very few people could even read back then. Very few people could write, right? So you're not going to write. You're probably going to try to capture a truth. You're probably not writing necessarily to deceive people and make up a story. So the question is, with all this stuff, is like, what was the original truth that they were trying to write down, and how much of it is getting distorted by translations from ancient Hebrew to Latin to Greek,
Aramaic to English.
like how much of it?
And there's
is it possible to even understand what they're saying without understanding the language? My friend Rick Strassman, he's a very fascinating guy, but brilliant guy. One of the things that he did is he taught himself ancient Hebrew so he could read the Bible in ancient Hebrew. It took him 16 years.
Wow.
But he did it because he's like, I want to know it in that language.
That's smart, because there's always an aspect of translation where you lose certain implications.
If you're playing the telephone game, you want to be second. You don't want to be 15th.
Exactly.
Right? And whoever was writing it down the earliest, that's probably, you're closer to their depictions of what that truth is than after King James starts fucking around with it and all these
Want
other
a new
people,
wife, got to remove
all
certain
these
stuff.
new people start getting involved. But boy, when you go to the really old stuff, the really old stuff is very strange.
The Orthodox, I'm telling you, the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, I actually had a staffer that went to Ethiopia. She was on a church trip, and she actually brought me back a copy, and she's like, you can translate it via Google Translation, so kudos to modern day technology. So I have it in my office. And actually, when I did my swearing in, I actually did my swearing in on the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible.
Wow.
It's cool. It's direct translation.
That's kind of crazy. It's I would wonder what the impact to all these religions would be if we had definitive proof that we're not alone. Like if there was an introduction, like some sort of an event where they decided, look, this government is too secretive with all this information. You're holding back the understanding of these intelligent life forms, that they are not the apex of this planet, nor are they anywhere close to the peak of the intelligence that's available out there in the universe. Just let me show you real quick, And then what does everybody do now? Like
Well, I think-
what happens to the Mormons? Like what happens?
I think that brings
everybody's gonna fucking blow a gasket.
Well, I think that brings us back to square one. So, by the way, I'm by no means saying that aliens are God. That's not what I'm saying.
No.
But I think that brings us back to the fundamental question on: do you believe that God exists? Because if you do, then you realize that our freedom, the freedom of choice, is not a man-given right, but a God-given right. And I think that goes back to the fundamental principles of like what we believe in true representation. So if you believe that God is real, God is powerful, then it shouldn't be a king or a man that you're looking to, but to God for divine inspiration and to make your life decisions. That's ultimately what freedom of choice is.
But I think even the Catholic Church has acknowledged the idea that if there is intelligent life somewhere else, it doesn't mean that God didn't create it.
Well, that's true. And it's
Maybe
interesting
God just didn't tell you about the neighbors.
Well, it does say in Enoch, and then also too, I think in Genesis, that the stars cried out. And so if you're looking, well, a star, if it's not, what do they mean by stars crying out? And then Enoch actually alludes to stars in certain capacities being potentially angels. Now, I'm not saying and this is kind of interesting because, I've had this aspect of my task force, what we've been investigating, but then I have, my personal beliefs and, my religious beliefs. And what I'm telling you is that in my position officially, I've seen men pervert information to get what they want. So it's not unlikely that an entire, very secret, very truthful text was omitted in an effort to control population and to insert yourself between individuals' relationship between them directly and God. And I think that,
well, especially if it doesn't agree with your interpretation
Whatever-
of God. I mean, and this is what the issue with these rabbis, right?
Well, I mean, if you're having people determine any information,
Right.
yes, you should not be able to do that.
Just the same thing as the UFO stuff.
The
There should
UFO
be
stuff-
no one should be the gatekeeper of information.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
and hence the transparency on the information.
Especially something that's it should be for all of us. This is nuts.
I think we're probably going to be responsible for the Book of Enoch sales probably increasing on Amazon.
Well, I'm going to buy it. I'm
Good.
going to buy it. I need to read it now.
You'll trip
'cause
out.
I think. Well, I wish I could. I mean, I'm sure there's some interpretations of the Dead Sea Scrolls that I could sludge through. But the thing about it is, I'd really love to be able to read it in Aramaic. I really wish I could read Aramaic. I just don't have the fucking time to do that.
You can
but if I
listen-
did,
Go on. You should see if there's an Audible. So
I'm
I've-
sure there is. But what I'm saying
Yeah.
is, I really like the Strassman idea of learning ancient Hebrew to be able to read the source material. That's where it gets really interesting. Because what were these people trying to write about? And if these people like Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson are correct, and these folks that believe in the Younger Dryas impact theory, the Bible was written a couple thousand years ago. These people that are talking about the Younger Dryas impact theory are talking about a cataclysmic event that wiped out advanced civilization 11,800 years ago.
Well, Plato talks about it, hearing
Yeah.
it from Egyptian teachers, and then going back to the Atlantean civilization,
Right,
and it
but
was
what
a race
was
was
my
far
point
advanced.
is, what was their Bible?
Well, so
You know what I mean? If you can get back to 11,800 years ago and read what they thought went down, because I think that's probably where the oral traditions come from. The oral traditions come from the complete collapse of society, rebuild over time, takes forever, and then a re-understanding of what you know to be true about the origin of man and the birth of the universe and why we're here. And then you got to figure out what Jesus is.
Well, so I actually, when I was in my early 20s, I actually went to Egypt to see the megalithic structures there, and then I went to Turkey to see the Sumerian inscriptions and carvings and what they thought the ancient Sumerian gods were, the Anunnaki, all of that. What's interesting is in Enoch, it actually has reference to the Anunnaki, but a different, I think it's like Anu is like the root term that's used for it. So,
Have you read the Zechariah Sitchin stuff?
no.
Hey, do you know of it?
I have heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, that's the most fun.
Yeah. Well,
Oh.
I will say with all of that going back to if you read Enoch and then follow about the fall of mankind and the angels with, and this is Christian theology, right? So angels came down, rebelled against God, interbred with humankind. That would be, I think, a good starting point for what potentially the Anunnaki were.
Yeah, God probably didn't like that they were coming around and taking the ancient hominids and juicing them up. Juicing them up, make them chess
Unapproved.
champions.
Heaven did not approve.
Yeah, it's probably against the code of the universe. God probably says, look, you can go visit, but don't mess around with it.
Well, there's definitely something to be said. It actually talks about this in Enoch about a divine justice. And so I think, again, going back to what is our job, how would society function? You have aspects in like government. Do you trust your government? Is government going to follow through and bring accountability? That's our job at the same sense in that we have to ensure that if we are to truly have an equal and fair society, that you have to have this aspect of justice that has to be carried out. And I can go back to something that I've found kind of crazy, but the mandatory minimums for child predators are not that high in this country, and so Congress can actually increase the mandatory minimums. But there's been a lot of lethargy about that, and it's like, why would you, not want to increase it? Some people are against the death penalty, and I always say that it's not, my job to play God or to judge people, just to help to arrange the meeting.
Yeah, it's a weird job, right? I mean, you're involved in the disclosure of things that people have questioned forever. I mean, those are the huge questions that exist from the 1960s on. UFOs, JFK, Martin Luther King, RFK. Those are the big ones.
We're
Those
pushing
are the big
for
ones.
it, and there's a good group of people that are assigned to it. I did say recently, so the MLK documents just came out, and we're wrapping up our JFK investigation. So after we finalize the JFK investigation, we're putting out an official congressional report on our findings, and people can read it and decide for themselves. Then we have RFK and then MLK. But I think a lot of the MLK family was actually very concerned that we were going to go into extracurricular. And that's not the objective of the task force. It's to specifically expose what the government was doing if they knew about the potential threats. And people say, well, why do we care about it? I constantly get, well, we shouldn't care about this. No, you should, because there has to be a check and balance. And when if the CIA was operating outside the purview of the federal government, if you know that whistleblowers are being punished, if there needs to be reform to the FOIA Act, all of this stuff, then we have to be able to put forward legislation to ensure it doesn't happen again. And what's been very interesting and almost serendipitous about the whole JFK investigation is you have President Trump now in the second term that's released all this information, and multiple presidents tried to, but they were worked against by their own secretaries within these agencies, and then deep state actors that try to block the efforts for release. Now you're seeing kind of a flush of the system, and even though information hasn't come out as fast as we would like it to, the fact that they've made these admissions is really good. But moving forward into how do you prevent this from happening again, it's people really do, like young people especially, because there's so much fatigue for people that have been in office for, and the reason I say I don't even want to do this for the next 10 years is because everyone, even people I've looked up to, after a certain amount of time, they lose their edge. And I think that that's because, you're up there, you're taking in a lot of incoming. It's not a fun job. You're getting attacked, you're getting beat down. It's stressful. But if you can put all your energy in it now, and then you can cut ties and pass it on, that's how our founding fathers wanted us to do, is pass the torch, stand up the next generation.
Right, but we have a bunch of career politicians
Correct.
that want to stay in office for 50, 60 years.
Correct, and that's a problem, and it's on both sides.
Yeah, it's on both sides.
So I'm trying to do a discharge petition now on term limits. So back in January of my first term, so back in January of 2022, I'm sure you saw there was this massive speakers fight about confirming Kevin McCarthy as the Speaker of the House. And I was part of one of those 20 that said, we're not going to vote for you just yet. We need to reform the institution and the way that we function, because power had been consolidated within the Speaker's position, so much so that how it's supposed to work is you're supposed to be able to bring a bill forward. That bill's supposed to come to the floor. All of these policies were being consolidated in one person, and if you didn't fall in line, you wouldn't get committee assignments, you wouldn't be able to fundraise. They would basically cut off all aspects of fundraising in Washington. And the mainstream media for a while was you guys are disrupting the process, you guys are fighting. Well, what the hell do you want Congress to do? You want us to just fall in line and not argue our principles? That's last time I checked, you're supposed to fight for that. And so we were able to reform the institution. But one of the things that we had negotiated with the former speaker was we wanted a vote on term limits, and that never came up. And so now, because of our very slim majority, one of the most slim majorities in U.S. history, we have the ability to do something called a discharge petition, and it's where you can physically go down and basically collect signatures on a bill. And so I'm bringing forward two that have already been filed. One is going to be to force a vote on term limits. So I'm going to see if members of Congress will actually put their name to actually bring that bill to the floor. There's going to be a massive, I hope, pressure campaign to activate members to do that. And then the other one is banning insider trading.
Yeah, that's been talked about for a while.
But hasn't been done. And we can do it now.
Nancy just needs a little more money, and then she'll quit.
Well, it's not, There was a comms director meeting for the entire GOP, and I'm calling up Burchett's bill on banning insider trading, and we were not invited to that meeting. Our staff was excommunicated from that.
I wonder why.
Yeah, I know. Something
How
about
weird.
making money. Weird.
Shocker. It's crazy how like openly corrupt that part of the business is. But the thing is, once you've become accustomed to be able to do something and you've been able to do it for decades, you're very reluctant to give that up. Why would you give that up? That's a huge advantage.
People say that it doesn't exist, but last time I checked, when you are given access to CEOs, when you're given access to information that are affecting markets, and then you're on the committee or that has purview over those bills, you do have information. Like
seems like you have a little more than the average person.
And there's a lot. You can look at people's. They go in, you're making 175 a year, and then all of a sudden you come out, you're worth like 20 million, 200 million. It's kind of shady.
You're not really gambling.
No.
The stock market is kind of gambling. You're not like the UFC doesn't even allow me to gamble, and I can't even affect the outcome.
But
How about that?
so you can't do it, but Congress can.
But Congress can, For
That's now, at least.
The inside information that I have, anybody could have. Mostly. Not really. No, that's not true. No, I know some stuff sometimes, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was told if I forced a vote that I was going to cost us the Republic is what I was told.
But the thing about the insider trading thing is the amount of money is so egregious. Like, isn't Pelosi now worth $400 million? Wasn't that
upwards? I saw upwards of $200 million, but
I thought
compounding interest.
She jacked up her portfolio recently significantly.
But it's not just her; it's on both sides.
Oh yeah, no, she's just the poster lady.
And
unfortunately,
then,
no slight at her. It's all across the board. If you look at how many people, it's red, blue. It's the whole thing. Yeah. Everybody's doing it.
I told my husband, I was like, we're not going to do stocks because it's just that's the one thing you can talk to anyone. I actually was reading an article, and the local press are like, Rep. Luna's trying to force a vote on this, right? And so, I'm always the kind of redheaded stepchild usually, especially in Dem circles. But this one lady posted, I actually started laughing. She goes, well, a broken clock is right twice a day. And I started laughing because I'm like, it's such like a bipartisan issue. Like over 80% of Americans don't think that Congress should be able to trade stock. And it's true because we're given access to information and that's truly influencing your decisions.
Did you ask her what the rest of you are wrong about?
I mean, I think it's party associations. Like some people just will never vote.
A broken clock.
Yeah, but
people are rabid and they're super upset now, obviously, because Trump's in office again. So that rabid nature has been over amplified.
It has. I think a lot of it, though, is driven by bot activity, I think is really big. I can tell you that when I first launched the task force, people were like, she's an intelligence asset. She's never going to release information. Then it came out that I actually don't have declassification authority. But we have been able to produce wins, and we are getting full cooperation from the executive branch. So we're just simply investigating the findings, collecting the information, and pressuring for release.
There's real people along with those bots, but real people are also influenced by bots as well.
Groupthink.
There's waves of negativity and positivity that go in certain directions that are orchestrated, and there's companies that are known companies that you could actually hire them to go do stuff.
They exist in Florida, actually. There's a couple of social media influencers that have been approached. I've seen it, so I know it exists.
It's crazy.
What's interesting, though, is it goes back to you never want to get in trouble in a crowd of people because they'll just look at each other. You ever see someone getting beat up and they just film it, right? Instead of going to help that person. And that's part of that groupthink. It exists online. I do think X needs to do something, at least be able to label bot accounts, because I've seen it happen, especially on certain things. Like I had done something to allow new moms to vote when you're recovering. Our job is different. Only 13 women in U.S. history have ever given birth. It's about to be 14 who are members of Congress. And God forbid we enter a war or something, we're not going to be able to vote. If you're recovering in a hospital, that's a pretty rare circumstance. And so there was definitely bot accounts that were attacking me for that and accusing me of destroying the Republic again. I said, I don't think that that's the case. But
that's not tinfoil hat stuff, folks. No. You really need to know that. Why wouldn't there be? This is the thing. If you were, whether it's this country, a corporation, another country, why wouldn't you automate your system or have AI or even just have actual people that have a job and their job is to type inflammatory, whatever it is, insults, whatever it is, whatever their accomplishment, whatever their goal they're trying to accomplish is. Why wouldn't you have a group of people that you have at your command if it's legal?
So
because it is legal.
It is legal. And in politics, what's interesting is they'll test, like, especially when you're running for office, it's kind of interesting because you'll actually, during my first race, I actually had a firm that I was going to for consulting. And they had someone that had worked at the firm that had also worked with like McDonald's branding. So like people that are running for office will bring on these firms and then they'll like give them kind of like a branding profile. What was interesting about that is that, you know, you have this aspect of bot activity. Social media at the time was kind of just resurfacing as if you want to be kind of influential, you have to be able to use social media, share your message, and get that out there. And I think Trump really kind of refined that and was kind of one of the leading figures in that, especially when Twitter 1.0 was in existence.
Right.
But then you had this aspect of people that were running for office, and then there was actually a censorship state in this country, and we found that out, that Twitter 1.0 was coordinating with the Department of Homeland Security. We found this out actually in a congressional hearing where they were actually, and DHS had a division under CISA that was supposed to be monitoring terrorist organizations, and they were using it on the American people to censor information, specifically on COVID, on January 6th, all of that. That is scary. You still have censorship issues in places like the EU. So like to think that they wouldn't use social media platforms, especially to influence the masses, is just, that's not a conspiracy theory. That happens. We have evidence of that.
Of course, censorship is influencing. And
It is.
It's also causing people to self-censor, which changes discourse.
Yeah, not wanting to have conversations.
Yeah,
with
but
fear
you
of
can
stigma.
get banned from Twitter for a variety of things, particularly during COVID. But I think COVID was also a great test case for them. Let's see, like if there is some sort of a catastrophe, some natural disaster, some national security issue where we could now enforce new regulations of censorship.
Well, and scary regulations at that, because COVID was really kind of dystopian. And going back to kind of, you know, I think you'd mentioned foreign government influence using bots. The one thing that's been interesting is in our investigation, so like taking now my task force hat off and going into actually problems that we see right now happening. You saw this like massive a couple weeks ago. Rift that was taking place between the American people, specifically on immigration, and all of a sudden these like pop-up riots. I actually called them the Temu riots, like the Temu Chinese app, because it came out via actually this woman, her name's Data Republican on X, and she actually tracked down the funding line. And what was happening was the Chinese government was basically propping up this billionaire, American billionaire, Neville Singham. And actually, he was donating money to organizations like Party of Socialism and Liberation. And they were actually funding a lot of these riot pop-ups in the area. So you had people that were being used, divided, for example, on the immigration topic. You literally have them passing out, you know, Mexican flags saying that they cared about immigrants, when in actuality, the financial ties was actually coming from the CCP. So the Chinese government, on many occasions, and it's not uncommon within Congress to know, even on apps like TikTok, they were showing certain information in order to cause a rift and influence people. This same individual, Neville Singham, actually, once we got this information, we sent a request to have him come testify to Congress. And he spends part of his year in Shanghai, China. And so we were not able to deliver him his subpoena, basically. And so there's a letter that Chairman Comer has now authorized to be sent that will go to the Treasury Department to freeze his assets unless he comes to testify to Congress.
Wow.
And that, mind you, this is not, you know, people, and like, look, I started out before politics with my feet getting wet as an activist. Like, that's actually how I started out in politics. So, like, I understand the immigration, the border. I like understand all arguments because I've been through it and I've had to debate it. But what's a problem for me is that you have foreign governments trying to cause a rift and then promote ideologies that will empower people specifically to push forward policy that will actually put us as like second tier as opposed to the Chinese government. And I do think that the Chinese government in their execution has been very, very specific about how they want to hinder our ability to be global dominators. And I think when you're looking at what happened in COVID timeframe, right? So like a lot of people said that Wuhan lab leak, that was a conspiracy theory. We now know that it happened and that was true. But at the same time, if you look at what President Trump was doing, he was actually trying to negotiate trade with China and he was winning. And then all of a sudden COVID happened. Well, what was interesting second time around in Trump 2.0 is that you have all these Temu riots taking place at the same time, and it almost got no coverage in the mainstream media, but you had multiple Chinese nationals that were caught trying to release agro-terrorism weapons.
Yeah, we talked about that stuff.
Yeah, agro-terrorism weapons, and then at the same time, the tariff war was taking place, and then you actually saw them trying to infiltrate. So I don't think it's by accident, but I do think that it's important to remember that just because you see something happening on the mainstream media, the media will always try to amplify something because it's rage baiting and it's click and it's views,
course.
which translates to money.
And if it's negative against Trump, it gets front page news.
Of course. But when you actually look at where the funding stream is coming from, it actually goes back to China. And this is not the only incident where they try to drive a wedge between Americans and then actually compartmentalize with Hispanic Americans specifically. So in 2016, now the largest voting minority in the country are Hispanic Americans, specifically of Mexican descent. And I think you can find that stat on pewhispanic.org. So when you're looking at voting demographics, how could you influence an entire demographic to help skew or influence a midterm election? And it would be specifically probably on the immigration topic to try to race bait people. But then you have this aspect of the same guy, Neville Singham, his wife actually funds an organization called Code Pink. So this is all Chinese money now going to a separate cause. And this one specifically is on the Israel versus Palestine issue. They don't care about Israelis or Palestinians. This is a Chinese funded group. And what they're doing is they're using that front in an effort to then divide on that topic as well. So it's a multifaceted approach using minority classes in order to actually push the end goal, which would be communism.
Wow.
And also, too, you can actually look on the flyers for these organizations. So PSL, Neville Singham is actually an open admirer of Mao Zedong. I mean, like, it's all up there and it's out there for you to find. But it's just crazy because most people, you know, you see this aspect of propaganda that's being shown to you, and you're not going to be like, who's funding that? You know, you're going to say, like, you know, to hell with that person. I'm going to fight for this. But they don't actually realize the more nefarious perspective of what's happening behind the scenes.
So I absolutely believe this is true, that I'm sure other countries fund similar things, but also it was in reaction to some of the ICE raids, right? I mean, it was a visceral reaction that a lot of people had, the idea of people just showing up and pulling people out of schools and pulling people out of Home Depot and pulling people that were just hardworking people that maybe snuck over here because they didn't have a legal way to get over here. But since they've been here, they've been good people and they're a part of communities. And that's what freaks people out, because when people thought about ICE, they thought, great, we're going to get rid of the gang members. They didn't think, great, you're going to get rid of a landscaper.
But the question is, why didn't they do it then why did these riots and why did this disagreement not happen under
I don't disagree with you. I think
Obama-Biden.
Listen, I'm sure some of these riots absolutely are manufactured. I'm sure they are. I'm sure these pallets of bricks that get left off on corners when they know that there's going to be
that
a
was
BLM
crazy.
riot,
Yeah.
that's bananas.
They fundraise. But to your point, so how do you fix something like the immigration system as a whole, right? So
you definitely don't have an open border. That's crazy.
Correct.
Because you need to know if people are criminals that are coming in. You don't want cartel members coming in. You don't want murderers coming in and serial killers. Like there's a reason why we have borders.
Yeah.
All the above, right? There's a reason why we have borders. But the thing that freaks people out is, like, how many corporations rely on illegal labor?
Oh,
how many
Chicken Farm's one of them. Last year, I was putting out some messaging on them because I'd watched this documentary about the slaughterhouses, how they're actually using migrant children, like 14, 15, in some of these slaughterhouses. And the lobbyist from Tyson Chicken Corporation contacted my chief of staff at the time and was like trying to basically say, like, hey, like basically back off. But like, I don't care. Like, it's wrong. Like, I don't care where you're on the spectrum. You shouldn't allow migrant labor with children specifically, because it's child slave labor.
I'll tell you a story that a high-level government official told me.
Okay.
I don't know if he said it on here or not, so I don't want to say his name.
Wait, so he was on here, so then that narrows it.
Fucked up.
Okay, it's okay.
Someone actually said to him that they don't want to stop the illegal immigration because they need cheap labor.
Correct. I actually think that it'll never stop, at least not in Congress.
That they don't have to pay them any benefits. They don't have to take care of their insurance.
Or pay them at all.
Well, they pay them, but they don't have to pay them what they're supposed to pay them.
Well, I've heard cases where people, specifically contractors, will walk on people if they know that they're here illegally. And like, so going back to like, how do you fix this?
Right.
Is one of the top cases that I handle, aside from Social Security help and refunds, like within my congressional office. So a congressional office does constituent services, and it's basically like customer service. Like, have you been victimized by the federal government? You know, call this number. That's your congressional office. So specifically on immigration cases, like if you've had an issue with the State Department, visas, all of that, you can contact your local congressman. And so what I will say is that we've had people that have spent like tens of thousands of dollars to come here, but it takes like 20 something years to do. And that's part of the problem is there's been such an influx and such a bog down of the actual system that our actual system is not functioning at the capacity that it should to actually help people come here the correct way.
Well, especially poor people, right? And if you want to immigrate to the United States, the application, one of the things they ask you is, are you an expert in something where people in the United States can't do it?
Like a doctor
or maybe you're a musician and like no one else could sing your songs. Like you maybe you could get citizenship from that. But if you're just a landscaper, you're just a guy who lives in a third world country and you want a better life and you say, I heard you can get across and I heard when you get across you can get work. Like what is that guy going to do? That guy doesn't have the money to hire a lawyer. He's not going to how is he going to prove that he's more valuable than a United States citizen that's already here doing the exact same job?
I do think that unless we are able to assign probably more lawyers, more judges to actually hear these cases, it's going to continue to be a problem. And I have heard, on the floor, these are conversations between members that to a certain extent, especially when you're talking about, like an e-verify system within the ag industry, that actually members of that committee don't want that because they know that the farmers are actually heavily relying on some of these illegals to work in their fields.
And construction crews and fill in the blank.
So I can confirm that.
Yeah.
That's
so
legitimate.
Isn't the solution force people to pay everybody exactly the same way?
Well, yeah, because you don't have the decrease in wages. However, I think the bigger problem that we have here, though, is that at least specifically in my district, and then also too having argued this, is that this gray area that's been created, in my opinion, they don't want a solution for. They do it intentionally with the understanding that both sides are going to fundraise off of it. In my opinion, if I was to be able to actually fix this, I would say that you have to, pause, let the system run through, take everyone in, vet them, make sure that they're not criminals, etc. But then the system allows time for it to actually catch up to itself, and then you can continue as is.
What you just said was so scary, that they don't want to resolve it because they want the issue to exist so they could fundraise for it against it.
Yeah.
That's so nuts and probably so accurate. That's probably so accurate. Because anytime anything ever happens, one of the first things they do is like, please donate, like throw it up. So all the people that are very reactionary are like, I can't believe this is happening.
And what's crazy is most elected officials might send out that email, but the email fundraisers actually are taking like 80% of that dollar. That's like usually the average retro. And it's like, I'm in the wrong business. This is crazy.
The scariest thing about nonprofits is how much profit they make. It's really weird when you see the salaries of some of these people that are in nonprofits. And
I will never.
$1 million a year. You're like, how is that?
And they do nothing.
It's crazy. Or what's going on with the LA fire thing, where they can't figure out where all the money went. It went to 188 different nonprofits.
Who's it? Spencer? Is his name Spencer Pratt? I was like, Spencer Pratt for governor.
He's a little pit bull. That dude's on that thing. Well, they burned his fucking house got burnt down.
And then they promised all these celebrities are like, yeah, donate. We'll give it to the victims. And it's like, where did it go? There's like this fine print that he wrote.
It's really weird, but it exposes the legality of these systems. It's legal for them to operate like that, where an enormous percentage of all the money that comes in goes to overhead. It goes to salaries.
Do the fine print.
And it's like, but it's such a scam. It's such a weird scam, and it's such a devious thing because you're pulling on people's heartstrings.
Which is why, going back to what I said, we need younger people and we need more normal people to run for office.
We need AI to take over.
I don't know about that.
AI is our god.
So no, no.
AI is our governor. AI is our king. That's what we'll say in school now. AI is our king.
We need to. I think AI can be used in good senses. Like I ask Grok things a lot, and I will argue points but I think we need to work alongside it because there's this aspect of AI that removes the humanity. Like I don't think you can teach AI empathy, and there's a certain aspect of humanity that needs to be kept involved in these decision-making processes. For example, if you have a drone that's been targeted to, let's say, eliminate a terrorist at this grid location, and it's functioning solely on AI, well, what's going to enable it to be able to pause on destruction of a location if there's children within it? I mean, if it's a bot, it's not thinking. And
that's
these are like the very
true, but the U.S. history of drone use is no better than what you just described.
Well, there are oversights and massive investigations, especially if it's in regards to civilian casualties.
Right, but civilian casualties are the majority of deaths from drones.
I would say based on the people that I've talked with and interacted, it's definitely happened in the past, and it's definitely problematic. However,
I think it's
people get in trouble for it.
But it's the majority.
I'd have to. I mean, I don't.
The majority of the
disbelieve,
people that died were civilians. They weren't the intended targets.
Well, and that's a problem, and that's where a lot of these people do. You have LOAC, so there's massive investigations with the JAGs, et cetera, that get involved in these investigations.
But I'm saying, like, would AI be better than that? I don't know.
I think you can have an AI decision-making process, but where there's a human involved in that step process. So, like, the human would be the final step in authority, so the AI would rank it. Maybe, and like, granted, I'm not an AI programmer, but I am saying that I think that there's an interface where you can have humans involved in the final step.
Well, the most terrifying solution is not that. Is don't use the missiles. Instead, you have a drone that specifically targets one person. You have a
there's
robot.
Suicide drones. Yeah.
But I mean, even worse, like
Assassin
flies
drones.
through the house and like lands on the dude's head and blows up.
Don't freak me out too much, because the Chinese have a little spy drone that's like literally this big. Have you seen it? Yeah, and they just
they have bug drones now.
Mosquitoes.
I'm sure our government does too. There's no way the Chinese are the only ones who do it. Especially if they really have been back engineering UFOs for the last 40, 50 years.
I don't think that any other government is as advanced in regards to that topic as we potentially are. And I say that because if that were the case, then they would be the world superpower.
I agree with that, but I also think that even though we probably have the best military contractors, we also get infiltrated by the Chinese government and the Russian government all the time.
Oh,
They're always
Congress gets infiltrated.
Yes.
Like, how
everybody
many
does.
people like have all of a sudden like girlfriends,
Hot
staffers?
Chinese girlfriend, wink, wink.
No comment on that one.
Guys are weak. We're so weak. All you have to do is be hot, and we're stupid. We
he's
fall
my
in
biggest
love.
fan, that guy.
Of course. There's always going to be people like
Sarcasm.
that infiltrate universities, that infiltrate research centers. They get information back to the CCP. There's that famous story I think Mark Andreessen told us about how what was it in Berkeley? I forget what the corporation was, but the power went down, and so all these CCP people panicked because they were supposed to send the information back, and if they don't, hey, maybe your grandmother doesn't get her medicine, maybe, you know what I mean, maybe your family gets a visit, like you have to be on time.
The University of Michigan has now had like two? I think those agro-terrorism was like University of Michigan.
Yeah,
and then
it's like all over the country. They've been infiltrated by like these governments have like very cleverly inserted their ideology into these universities. Like Yuri Bezmenov talked about this, that Russia was doing this in the 1980s. It was 1984.
The one thing that's been interesting is, and a lot of people aren't talking about, there's one representative member, Republican from California, that's addressing it. But when they have surrogates have children here for U.S. citizenship, but then they take them back and fully integrate them and educate them in China. And so technically they're U.S. citizens, but they are being totally raised with the ideology and perspective of the Chinese government.
Oh, boy.
And that's an interesting perspective. That
And
I
then
think
they
a lot
come
of
back
people-
over here and they're full U.S. citizens.
Yep.
Working
Full
for the
access
Chinese
to,
government.
Yes, access
Oh,
to all of our
boy.
resources, everything, education system.
And then we sell the Chinese government land around our military bases.
Oh, that has been I get I love our libertarian brothers, okay, and sisters, but I have gotten into so many debates on this because they're like, well, we shouldn't limit an American's ability to actually sell their property, and I'm like, yeah, but the Chinese government literally wants to eliminate the West as we know it, and so we have to be cognizant of that. And also, too, by the way, it's not like you're just like buying a military installation. You think that they're not actually putting tech and or observing, monitoring, pulling all of our resources.
Not just
it's
that.
crazy.
Like Mike Baker talked about this on the podcast, that they sell cell phone towers
Huawei.
to these companies. Well, Huawei, which was they were really problematic, but they sell these cell phone towers near these bases, and so they sell them at a discounted rate. And then the Huawei stuff was crazy because it actually had like a third-party access built into some of their systems.
And a lot of the tech that they actually sell here, whether it's to our law enforcement, so like anytime you have specifically, I would say like within even our craning and like our actual shipping operations, those things are sending signals back home.
Yeah, well, we're so stupid we can't make those things.
Well,
That's what's dumb.
we should be making. So there's policy changes where
100%.
if you have an American business, you can now actually get a big tax incentive for manufacturing back home.
That's great, but it's going to take 10 years for us to even catch up to where they are now.
We just got to stay
That's
the course.
But what a dumb idea. Like, everyone has a cell phone. No one can make a phone. What? Is that no one saw that coming? That's bananas. All
they
of them get
sold
made in
us
China.
out in the 70s for manufacturing, and I think that that's where you're seeing this, aspect of people that are very like, if you talk about, and I'm not like an isolationist by any means, but like I do believe that we should have, especially with COVID, everyone saw this.
Yeah.
We should have certain things that are just manufactured here. I think tech is extremely important. I think Palmer Luckey's doing like laptops or something now.
Oh, good.
In the United States, they're trying to actually move that over.
Elon should make a phone. I bet he's thinking about it because he's in some sort of a dispute right now with Apple because Apple won't. There's something about the way Grok AI shows up, and he's saying that their algorithm is essentially rigged, where OpenAI is like Grok AI is never featured.
Oh, really? I
said
have
something
the
about a
Grok app
lawsuit.
on my phone, but
So maybe that'll incentivize him to make a phone.
Elon, make a phone, and we'll try it out.
Elon Musk says Apple is rigging the App Store for ChatGPT. The tech mogul is threatening immediate legal action, accusing the iPhone maker of unequivocal antitrust violation designed to favor his AI rival.
Oh, is his AI rival the Sam Altman guy?
Yeah. It's interesting. I wonder if there's... I mean, you don't just say something like that, do you?
No. He's not a dummy. He's smart. There's definitely something there.
Oh, readers added context. 2025, DeepSeek reached #1, and DeepSeek's the Chinese one, right?
Oh, and DeepSeek's freaky about some of the stuff that it can do.
Just 1 month ago, Perplexity also reached #1 overall in India's App Store. Both of these occurred after the OpenAI Apple partnership announced on June 10th, 2024. But what about the United States? Because the United States is the biggest market when it comes to like, we're probably the highest percentage of people that use Apple. In the world.
It's literally when you go to buy a phone, it's usually an iPhone. And
I'm
that's it.
almost. I think it's something crazy with kids. It's like 84% or something like that.
Oh, don't get me.
use
If you have a kid, keep them
iPhones.
off phones as long as you can.
Yes, for sure. But
Parenting
I mean,
advice.
but the point is, like, the App Store in America is the monopoly in this country. If you want to get an app,
I mean, it's
not a monopoly, but the leader, the head leader.
To be honest with you, I've only ever had an iPhone, and so that's the only platform I've ever used. I know it's like Android versus iPhone.
No, I have both. They're both really good. The Android's way better than it used to be.
But it's still freaky.
I had it back in the day, but it's right there where an iPhone is right now, just different, and it gives you a lot more access to stuff.
Well, it's still freaky, though. Then you have these phones that are considered actual safe phones that aren't ripping your data and basically turning on every 10 minutes to kind of be able to target you for sales, whatever it might be. I can tell you that, given my job and some of this stuff, I am totally freaked out by having an iPhone, and I look forward to the day where I don't have to have a phone. I'm going to get a flip phone. They're going
to already have a chip in your head by then.
No, absolutely. Of all people, no chips. We're chip free.
I don't know if there are any phones that really truly are safe. I mean, I know that there's some phones that run on alternative operating systems that aren't Google. What is that alternative system that they use with Pixel phones that now, at least the French government, when they find people that have Google phones, they immediately look at that person as a point of interest.
Because they're like, we can't track you.
Yeah, because they're using this other operating system. What is it called again? I can't remember it, but it's what Adam Curry uses. It's a de-Googled iPhone that uses an alternative operating system. So this doesn't send data. I'm sure the GPS sucks. It's probably
called Graphene.
That's right, Graphene OS. So there's multiple different OSs that people use outside of the Google, but you can only use it on Android phones, and a lot of people use it on Pixel phones. You can actually buy them. What is that guy's name? The Asian gentleman who has that, Rob Braxton. He sells them. And he is like a security advocate. He's always talking to you about how insecure all of your technology is and explaining why they added this and what this means now and where your data is going and how they can track you. And
it's made me...
So he sells de-Googled iPhones. Oh, he's a response to Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is wondering what I'm hiding 5 years ago. I was fucking around. I was just saying, what's that guy hiding? He's scared. Well, so this guy's been at this forever, right? So 5 years ago, we were talking about him, and he was making these phones 5 years ago.
Well, and from a government perspective, you have this aspect of a lot of people don't want to reform FISA. FISA, in the way that it can surveillance Americans, is pretty freaky. We would like to...
Really freaky.
Really freaky.
Yeah.
And we, I actually did not get a committee assignment on House Armed Services as a vet because I voted against FISA. And I was one of 2 that voted against it, and they said that I was not a team player. But when you actually look at
play for the team.
Yeah. It seems to be like an ongoing thing. I am playing for the team, but it's just not
But
the
isn't
DC
that nutty?
team.
Isn't that a nutty thing to say?
Yeah.
Like, whatever happened to representative of the people? What are we doing?
There's still a few good representatives.
I believe
but
you.
It's few and far between.
Well, I think it's hard. It's probably hard to stay the course. It's probably hard to keep your morals and your ethics. Why everyone around you isn't.
You have to not. So some of the best representatives, best even people in government, are the ones that did not have to do this job.
Right.
And
That
that's
makes sense.
because if you're giving up something to come here, it means that you're doing it for the right reasons. If you have nothing to gain from this position and this is the only thing you've ever wanted to be, you're usually not the best person for that job. And I say that because you are then only going to do what it takes to get reelected, which means that you are willing to compromise your principles. Because there will be decisions that you have to take where you're going to have to stand firm on your principles and be like, I can't vote for that. And there's massive pressure campaigns like, when a certain bill comes up, if I'm voting against it, you have planted stories in the press. You have super PACs that will come in and drop text messages in your district to your constituents saying that, did you know that Representative so-and-so voted against this? And so you have to be able to be like, all right, I'm just going to just disconnect. And at a certain point, you do have to do that because then you'll go crazy.
You definitely go crazy if you read all the bots.
Oh, you can't read. Don't fight with the
read
bots.
anything.
Don't fight with the bots.
No, people do read them. It's just interesting. That's like representative, like when you see representatives today, some of them are kind of characters, where they become...
It's like Gotham.
Yeah, where they become popular. They become like Fetterman, is popular.
He's not too... He's changed, though. He's like actually... makes sense on some
much more
occasions.
reasonable
Yeah.
than most.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's a logical guy. He's a very nice guy. I think it's hilarious that he still wears the hoodie and the shorts. And like, he's exploiting a rule. I mean,
He is in the
he's
Senate.
kind of right. He's kind of right, and that is really how he likes to dress. Like when I saw him in D.C., it was like 10 degrees out. This dude had shorts on and a hoodie, a Carhartt hoodie, and he's like, that's genuinely him. I think. He's a good guy.
Well, he's a big guy too, so like there's only a
probably
certain
sweats a lot.
Yeah.
Probably easily warm. Likes
Not
being in
saying
the
that we know
cold.
he sweats, but just
For sure he does. He's a big guy. But he's reasonable. But the point is that he's kind of a character. Like Jasmine Crockett's a character. AOC's a character. There's characters, and they're like main characters in this political show that we're all watching on television.
Oversight. So I actually was on Oversight with all those people except for Fetterman, and what I'll tell you is that Oversight tends to bring out the characters for sure. But I will say is that actually, I have been able to, on certain things, like with AOC, I introduced a piece of legislation. So there was a partner bill in the Senate with Bernie Sanders and I think Josh Hawley to cap credit card interest at 10%. And then I started getting a lot of heat for it because people were like, you can't do that. And I was like, well, most of these banks that we're talking about are actually taking government bailout. So if you're taking a government bailout and you're essentially operating off the goodwill of the federal government, then you should be held to standard, because then you have like predatory lending. And what ends up happening is some of these people will take out a credit or max out their credit cards, and then for the rest of their life they're paying back the debt. And then also there's something that we've been able to introduce. So this is like the more populist representation where you see both the right and the left kind of agree on certain things. And there's another bill that I'm introducing with another Democrat and another Republican that's a more moderate Republican, but it's actually to cap student loan interest at 2.5%.
That would be wonderful, because I was just going to ask you about that. I was reading this woman on X, and she was talking about how she graduated with student loans that equaled, I think it was $28,000. She's paid off. She's never missed a payment. Paid off $24,000, and she still owes $60,000.
Yeah. So what they do is they actually, and I've been quoted on this, but it creates an indentured servant basically for the rest of their life. They're paying off this debt, and you can never actually, function
right, that's
in a tough care.
absolutely insane.
Yeah.
If she's telling the truth, and I believe she is, that's absolutely insane. That you could owe $60,000+ after a $24,000 or $28,000 loan when you've paid $24,000 of it off.
It's for people that are actually trying to better themselves that might have to take out loans for that. It's crippling, and then they actually can't get a good start at being contributing members of society because they're always functioning in the debt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you want to make America great again, have less people in debt, have less losers.
Opportunity.
Yeah, have more
Opportunity
people that
drives.
can get things going on because they're not burdened by some crazy debt that really is not right. It's not right that you do that to an 18-year-old kid and saddle them down like that for the rest of their life.
And to be clear, like, I'm not talking about student loan forgiveness, and I think you're not either. But, you know, I had to join the military. I paid for my college using the GI Bill. And so do I think student loans forgiveness is fair? No. But is this a way that we can actually make a happy medium to where people are actually given the opportunity to pay back the debt? And yes. And so I look forward to introducing that. But that's a piece of legislation that should be on the floor and that it's not. And it's not on the floor.
I think in an ideal world, education is free. In an ideal country where you really care about the people and you really want more success stories, education is free. Difficult to get into. You have to be qualified, a true meritocracy, but education should be free. And if these certain people from different parts of the country don't seem to be getting in, address that. Figure out what's wrong with their school system and throw federal funds at that. It's not impossible to figure out why certain school systems are doing poorly and other ones are doing great. And
I will tell you from a personal lens and perspective. So when I was in my freshman year in high school, I moved up to LA with my mom. And by the time I graduated, I went to 6 high schools and an adult school. That's actually, I barely graduated. And what I will say is that one of the high schools I went to was...
Why did you go to different schools so much?
It just... how it ended up functioning. So like my freshman year, my mom went through a divorce. My dad got arrested. So I have an interesting background. So there was that.
A lot of stuff.
Yeah. But I ended up actually going to Venice High School one of these times. And that was around my junior year. And what the LA Unified School District was doing at the time is they were actually busing in kids from other parts of LA County. And at the time, specifically in the early 2000s, there was a big issue with the Black and Chicano gangs in LA. And so, you know, what was happening outside in the neighborhoods was carrying on into the school districts. And when you have gang activity and like kids, the only opportunity that they have is like being able to join a gang and that's it. You know, they're never going to go to college. They're never going to have the opportunity. And so that carries on into the education system. They're never given a chance. And so I think in Florida, we've been doing it right with school choice. President Trump's been pretty big on that. But being able to give students or their parents the ability to send them to good schools without gang activity outside of their zip code, that matters. And that does impact people.
And cracking down on gang activity.
There was a kid that was shot in the parking lot of my school. Yeah, and shot and killed. You can actually pull up the article, Venice High School school shooting.
No, listen, you don't have to tell me. Venice was crazy.
Back before it was gentrified, it was rough.
Yeah, and it's kind of getting crazy now with homeless people.
I haven't been back since I basically left. So when I was 19, I joined the military, and then my mom ended up leaving California with my little brother and sister probably about like 5 years ago now.
Venice is always such an interesting part of LA.
Yeah.
Because it's like LA, but really weird. Like weird people. Like interesting,
LA
weird
is weird
people.
though as a whole.
Yeah, but Venice has like a surf culture. You know,
Dogtown.
There's a lot of people that are artists that live there. That affects the vibe of the place. Like Venice in the 90s was really cool.
Well, in the early 2000s, it was cool too, but it was rough. I mean,
What's always been filled with crime?
Well, I got jumped. Yeah, and when I was
jumped?
I got jumped in high school. I swear, like part of the reason why I'm such a huge advocate for like standing up to bullies is probably because of that. Yeah.
Damn. Venice was rough. Yeah.
Back in the day.
I had a buddy of mine who lived there, and the park where he used to take his kid, someone got shot in it.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, great. Where do I take my kid now? I can't, you know.
Honestly, so like
crazy.
Seeing all that though, like being able to see that and then kind of tell that story, like I do think that there's power in that because there's people that go through that and like think like, man, I might not be able to like be successful, but that's not true. You can always fight your way out of it. I joined the military at 19. Best thing I ever did. And I met a lot of other people in the military who like grew up in inner city Chicago or wherever it was. They were able to go back and help their family. And like to my mom's credit, you know, my mom also has like an incredible story, but she had me at 20 years old, single mom. My dad ended up eventually getting clean, but my husband and I moved him in with us and then he got sober. And so that story in itself, I think, you know, you tell your story and it empowers other people, especially to be fighters and not just give up.
Right, because a lot of people have bad childhoods.
Yeah, and people aren't going to tell you that. Like, no one's going to be like, you know, but
it's also great for someone to hear a story like yours or someone who came out of a similar childhood maybe that they're having.
Yep.
Or maybe even worse than they're having. Mm-hmm. And you see what you've been able to do. Like, that's powerful to people.
Well, and it is. And it's powerful, I think, to an idea that would like to box certain people, whether like you're a woman or you're Hispanic, into this stereotype on like how you should believe and think and vote.
Or you're poor, you come from a single mom. I think that was one of the most important things about Obama becoming president. We heard like,
The
oh,
story.
girl, the guy comes from a single mom, and he became the president of the United States. It was like, for a lot of people, it's like, okay.
Relatable.
You know, yeah, well, maybe my life isn't what I wished it would be, but look what that guy's able to accomplish. Maybe I can do something too instead of thinking I'm going to be a loser forever.
Well, what was interesting is I shared my story. So, like, remember I told you I started out as an activist, and I would tell people this because, you know, I do feel like, too, at a certain sense, when you tell your story, you can share that you're empowering other people to take something and turn it into a positive. And within maybe a couple weeks of me getting elected, I all of a sudden started having this Washington Post reporter reaching out to my family and actually asked my mom whether she had proof that my grandmother had actually passed away HIV positive.
Oh, God.
And was harassing.
They're trying to catch you in
lying.
lies.
Yeah, and so they put out this nasty, nasty article about me, basically trying to say that I had fabricated my dad's incarceration record. They had tried to say that I was a registered Democrat in Washington, like all this stuff that was categorically false. And I had actually gotten contacted from like my old
A
sergeant
nice
from the
little
military.
smear piece.
Oh, it was terrible, but I had receipts. And so after this came out, I said, no, hold up. And I actually gave Fox News all of my stuff that I had, and I was able to refute. And then Time Magazine had actually reached out, and they said, would you mind if we conduct like an interview on your background? I said, have at it. Here's my information. I had actually even gotten my DNA done to like prove that I'm Hispanic because of the fact that I'm lighter skinned. When I got elected, there was like this controversy on how Hispanic was I, and like it was actually a thing. I'm like, I'm not supposed to be like Speedy Gonzalez with a sombrero running around. You know, it's like, what am I supposed to?
That's so racist to
It's like
ask
so-
how. That's so
how Hispanic
racist.
are you?
How Hispanic? Isn't that funny that that's the time where the left is allowed to be racist?
Just like so crazy.
That is such a crazy thing to say. How Hispanic is
Are
she?
you, right?
How black are you?
Exactly.
Mr. Obama. You don't look
actually-
that black to me.
It was crazy, but I actually gave all this information to Time Magazine.
Can you imagine saying that to Obama? How black are you?
When people would ask me, I actually mentioned that to a reporter, actually, because of the fact that he's half white and half black. And I said, I'm sorry, last time I checked, am I not allowed to be white too? Because there's this aspect of I wasn't Hispanic enough because I'm white, but then also this aspect of I'm not white enough because I'm Hispanic. So like, which one are you?
Oh, boy. That's so ridiculous. That's such a ridiculous thing to ask. It's like it goes in the face of what's supposed to be about their principles. Their principles are supposed to be not seeing color at all.
Oh, there's
And the
a
idea
lot.
that they're going to attack you and say you're pretending to be Hispanic or that you're barely Hispanic enough.
I'm not Hispanic enough.
What percentage are you?
I'm half.
That's 50 fucking percent.
I'm
That's so
half.
crazy.
And then I had to explain, though, to
Oh
a
my
reporter.
God.
I said, well, if my mom's half and my dad's half, what does that make me? And she goes, a quarter. I said, no, that's not.
I'm 3/4 Italian. Imagine someone
You're not
telling me
Italian
that I'm not
enough.
Italian. That's hilarious. That's so racist. That's such a crazy thing that they allow it as long as it's coming from their side.
And also, too, if I were on the other side, I'd probably be like a rock star. So long story short, so this article comes out. Time Magazine investigates after doing like 20-something hours on background. I gave them all the evidence, and they actually ended up writing an article on me called The Influencer That Came to Congress, and then named me as Time Magazine's next 100 most influential in the world.
Well, that's nice of them.
I'm just glad that it vindicated me because it was not a fun spot to be in.
God,
Yeah.
It's just weird. You know, I know that it's always going to be a part of politics, but it's so disappointing as an enlightened culture that we don't disavow that kind of reporting
But
and recognize from both sides how detrimental it is to finding out what's real and what's true.
It was done though because of the fact that people like me specifically don't meet a certain stereotype, and so it was an effort to discredit that effort.
I get it.
But
I
it's
get
like
why
for
they
people
did
like
it.
wondering, why, and so like
I think most people are going to know why they did it.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious, but it's just bizarre that we allow it as long as it's from our side. Progressives will allow like the most devious behaviors from their side. Republicans do the same thing, the most devious shit, as long as it's beneficial to their side. And that's what's really stupid. And we need to disavow that. You could disagree with someone, don't think they're the right person for the job, vote against them. That's all great. But when you start like deceiving people with false depictions of who a person is and making up a bunch of stupid shit and calling into question how Hispanic they are.
it's so ridiculous.
Just stop. This is childish. It's like this shouldn't be where we're at in 2025.
No.
It shouldn't be where we're at as a mature nation. We're 300 years old now. Figure it out.
It was I think it was actually for my mom especially. Like I've been through the ringer of politics, so like I'm kind of battle hardened for it. I'm like, oh, another hit piece, like I don't care. But it was my mom and like what she was subjected to, and I was like, my mom is really cool. Like she put herself through law school when I was in high school. Like she left an abusive marriage. She has come a long way, and so for like her to be treated like that, I was like, it's just like one thing in politics, like you leave the family out of it.
It's immoral. It's
immoral,
gross,
yeah.
and it's one of those things that we shouldn't tolerate. We shouldn't be doing it. We shouldn't advocate for it. We shouldn't be happy if it's done against the side that's ideologically opposed to us.
It's gross.
It's gross. It's gross as a civilized group of human beings that calls itself a country. It's gross. It's gross. It's like there's other ways to do it. You don't have to just be a twat all the time.
I prefer debating on ideology tends to be the best, but
Yeah.
people always, it's like in fighting. You can't like just go and sucker punch someone. It's kind of like the same thing. And that was kind of, they tried to sucker punch me and I was like,
Well, it's like
Jackie Chan it
you
up.
don't have to be fighting if you believe what you believe and you have a rational argument. You can have a conversation. And this seems to be something that people don't want to do anymore for some weird reason. They want to just stick to what they think, stick to what they believe, and they don't want to hear a rational opposing viewpoint because they're so married to their stupid ideas.
It's a lot interesting how Congress functions when the cameras are off. And I think people would definitely change their opinion because a lot of people will do it for clicks, ratings. And social media has not helped with that because people are looking for what can go viral next. There's like this viral theory that people, they think that they can only be successful in their policy or their argument, whether it's committee hearings or whatever. They want that clip that they can post and then get notoriety for. So social media has been both a blessing and a curse in the social media sphere in the political sphere because you can get your information out directly to the American people using it and refute bad information. But then there's also this aspect of like, I wish people could see the conversations that take place behind the scenes because it wouldn't be so inflammatory. Basically is what I'm saying.
That makes sense. Well, full transparency will come with the chip. Anna, just put the chip in your brain.
No chips. Don't take the chip.
Everybody will have full transparency. It seems like this whole thing, your whole journey in becoming involved in politics has been pretty stressful. Is that...
It's definitely not something I want my son to do.
Is it what you thought it was? What did you think it was going to be like before you got in, and what was different once you got in there?
So when I first started out in politics, I started out I joined the military at 19. I paid my way through college. I wanted to be a doctor. So I got into a med school program at SGU in Grenada. And I was supposed to go to that. And then I kid you not, like the day before I was supposed to leave, I got recruited to work for a nonprofit to basically help lead out Hispanic activism nationally. And I thought that's how I could make a difference. And then I realized that as part of that job, they were putting me on television. I had a booker. And so I was talking about stuff happening, but it was more the commentary on inflammatory things. I actually wanted to address what was happening with human trafficking. And I actually requested the State Department's report. I was a big activist with it. I was working with the nonprofit at the time. And I realized that they only wanted me to talk about what was getting them the ratings. And so I did realize, I was like, well, they keep, though, talking about what people in D.C. are doing. So if I want to change the discussion, I have to go to Washington to do it. So I called my husband. I was like, we're going to run for office. He goes, what do you mean we?
We?
Yeah. Because what do you mean? I was like, well, from what I gather, everyone's like a team effort. And it's totally true. If your spouse isn't on board, good luck because politics is nasty.
Right.
And so he ended up basically figuring it out with me. And for someone like me, there's no how-to manual on how to run from off. It's usually family, like literally family affairs where like people, like their parent did it or they have like a direct immediate tie to it. So I figured it out. And now that I'm in office, I'm realizing that I can make an impact to an extent with some influence, but it would be a lot more helpful if there were 10 other of me. And so when I'm done in office, I'm going to help recruit younger candidates that have the ideological perspective that I do to run them. And then I'm going to help do things for them behind the scenes to help get them in.
You're going to be a mastermind behind the scenes.
to help.
It just seems like a super broken process.
It's not. So I've traveled a lot. I've seen a lot of other parliaments. I'm a member of the House Democracy Partnership Institute. I've gone to a lot of countries, and we still have the best system.
I believe that.
Yeah, but
I
we
believe
need
that, but I still believe it's a mess.
It's a mess, though, because good people don't want to run, and they have to.
Right.
Young people have to run.
It's also a mess because the people that have been in positions of power for so long are so set in their ways and are so deeply ingrained in the system, and all the tentacles of all these different special interests and all the money that's all connected to all these decisions is so it's just so I don't know if it's possible to unwind all that stuff.
It is if you have enough fresh blood. So like, how do you shock a system, right? And
Yeah.
you need to infuse it. And so right now we have an interesting time period because we have division. So like going back to kind of the declassification efforts that we've been working on, for the first time in U.S. history, you have an aspect of the government that's being transparent and releasing information. Like we're helping wherever we can on that. But that is only possible because the right people with the right mindset were appointed in those agencies to be able to try to force the system to do something. But there's this aspect of that's just the executive branch, but you have the legislative branch. And the legislative branch needs younger people that want to do this because they truly believe in fixing the system. And you cannot be a pessimist in this job or else you will go crazy.
Yeah, I would imagine.
You would go crazy. So you have to be an optimist and understand that there is a solution for it. And going back to kind of like those like little quantum breadcrumbs, I've had enough stuff happen where I know I'm on the right path. But I also think that, part of what I'm supposed to do is like to help other people do this. So I'm going to help kind of execute that mission.
How much longer are you going to be in office?
I don't know, but not definitely in the next 10 years. I promise you, I'm going to be with a beekeeper and a flip phone, and
All
that's it. no internet, just
All right.
off the grid.
Well, if I'm still doing a podcast, then let's talk.
Okay.
Tell me about hopefully then we'll know UFOs are real. They've already landed.
At least we'll get some declassified stuff, right?
Hopefully we'll have no clue. Remember back when we didn't know who killed JFK?
Yeah, well, now we know.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it. It was fun talking to you.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right, thank you. Bye, everybody.